Good evening and welcome to the Jinn&Tonic show. On this Friday, the 4th of May, 2018, we will be chatting about non-believers in Islam tonight. I want to welcome my, as always, amazing co-host. Stop spamming. Good evening, sir. How are you this fine week? Which you said was quite short.
Hey,
Okay, that was a short response as well.
no, I've got a huge echo I need to sort out.
Oh dear, you're coming through okay on this side, so just know that we are hearing you just fine. Good evening and welcome if you are joining us. Good evening, vegan dude. We might actually have a brief chat about that in the crazy comments as it happens. Speaking of which, we'll let Stops get on there and fix his echo if he has one. So what I shall do is jump in. I haven't got too many crazy comments this evening, but as always, there's a few that will hopefully be a highlight. So let's jump straight into those. So here we go. First crazy comment of the evening. So this is a video with Hamza, Darren Hamza and Abbas, two Muslims, regulars in Speaker's Corner. The straightforward Hamza approach and the calm, elegant Abbas approach. Almost like bad cop, good cop. Both are needed in my view. I love this channel. I gain so much knowledge from you guys. And then some words there. So if you haven't seen them, obviously, Darren Hamza's this sort of very loud, brash Muslim who interrupts and who has this very argumentative style. And then this other fella, Abbas, is more the sort of guy that wants to paint Islam as the best thing that's ever been on this planet, the most peaceful, wonderful, loving, amazing ideology and worldview that you can possibly have. And any violence was only defensive and everything is just wonderful. So they are certainly a contrast in their styles. But as far as I'm concerned, neither of them are any more true than the other. So that's the first one. Moving on. Again, good old Tan. I believe Tan tried to get into... Oh, let me read this comment, then I'll say that. So here's a comment based on Tan. A cancer and a disgrace to Malaysians. UK and Speaker's Corner, a representative of idiocy, lunacy and hate. Seriously, he needs to get deported. Well, I'm sure this fellow will be wonderfully glad to know that Tan was, I believe, according to Raj, and I don't know if Raj is in the comments, but if he is, you can confirm, Raj. But I believe Tan was refused entry again, and it may be to do with his visitor's visa. So depending on circumstances, but generally, because I have family members who use the visitor's visa, he may well be able to come back in 6 months' time again. So let's hope that happens. And in fact, there's even a quote-unquote religion that has formed called, I think it's called Tango. Is it something like that? So there's people that have attempted to honor Tan for his contribution in Speaker's Corner. So here's a little comment thread. I'll read the entire bit. So this was a comment thread based on a video with Shabir and another gentleman who spoke to Shabir after that vegan one. So if you were with us last week, you will have seen us dissect the video with Shabir speaking to a vegan and not really making much sense and using all sort of tactics, which we exposed. But this was a video after that. And so I responded, and the gentleman's name is Ken, so I responded here when I saw this video. Ken exposed the complete lack of any argument against veganism from Shabir. All Shabir constantly repeated was yardstick, and Ken explained that the yardstick is the unnecessary suffering of conscious sentient creatures. That's the words I used, but he basically said that, which Shabir seemed completely unable or unwilling to comprehend. Oh, I need a D at the end there. If any of you Muslims think Shabir made an argument, you're delusional. And then either Shabir or one of his underlings replied, peace be upon you, and also, you're entitled to your opinions. That is all they are. It does, however, seem that you are oblivious to the argument Brother Shabir is posting that of the yardstick. As you stated that according to you, the yardstick that Ken used was the unnecessary suffering of sentient beings, and you seem to validate his position. And so you also agree with Brother Shabir that even that position requires a yardstick. What is that? And I responded, your quip about opinions is pointless and valueless. I've explained the yardstick, and no, the yardstick does not require another yardstick. You can challenge the yardstick if you wish or can, But what you cannot do, if you care about remaining rational, is insist that the yardstick needs a yardstick. Please consider this carefully before replying. I notice you are silent about Shabir attempting to offer any sort of argument against veganism. And I missed off the last bit there. You're again entitled to your opinions. That's all they are. Respectfully, you did not, neither did the first person spoken to, neither did Ken, provide a yardstick. All you have done is insist that it is a yardstick, irrational. And again, you agree with Brother Shabir that if there are two opposing arguments, then logic requires that the two opposing side adopt an independent yardstick. What is that? The rest of your post is respectfully not worth entertaining, as it is blah, blah, blah. So obviously this person has I don't know if it's a comprehension problem, who knows, but seemingly unable to accept a yardstick that I produce. So by all means, go watch it. It's on the All Truth Revealed channel. And there's this guy, I don't think they put the name Ken, but he says his name in the video. So, and he made a lot of sense, actually. He challenged Shabir on this whole thing because he'd watched the previous vegan video, and so he challenged Shabir on what Shabir had said to the vegan prior in this particular video. So this is a Facebook message, and here's a non-Muslim, I think, at the top, the first part. The question would be, Shazad Ali, if it is true that a person is killed for insulting the Prophet, would you support it? And this fellow Shazad Ali says, it depends. It's only possible if a true Islam state under a court's no vigilante justice is allowed. Even then, it all depends on the person if he is spreading hate or mischief within the state and causes unrest. I don't know, unrest maybe? All these things need to be taken into account. At the end of the day, it's up to the judge. So the fact that anybody can suggest that somebody would be killed for insulting the Prophet under any circumstances is...
Could you hear?
Sorry? What'd you say there, Stops? Oh, I've lost you again. Okay, you've muted yourself, but...
oh my God. I can hear myself more than I can hear you. I seem to have a huge delay in here because I just read what Lily was saying. I'm tired of Shabir always rubbing his yardstick.
Nicely put. Yes, yeah. I mean, it's buzzwords. Evidence and logic are the other buzzwords that get thrown out every now and again when there's nothing, of value to be said. Just throw out a few words like truisms. That's another thing that he's exceptionally good at. Let's throw out a truism as if that somehow is an argument or has any value. For those who don't know, a truism is just something that is obviously true, which it's a trivial statement. In other words, it's not something that adds any value to a conversation. Right, last one. I think here's the last one. If someone is insulting Allah, Prophet, or Qur'an, it is most probably because of ignorance or intellectual laziness. I would first try to tell them the truth if they are not wildly attacking, just making ignorant statements. If they target Islam and do this willingly as a job of spreading lies, hate about Islam and Prophet and Allah, then things change. He should be punished. And Islam means all prophets, including Jesus, Isa, and including attacking holy places of religious churches, synagogues as well. So obviously there's another few Muslims on Facebook at least, that do think that attacking or insulting the Prophet in certain ways is not acceptable. So there we go. Good evening, Abu. How are you, my good sir?
I'm fine. How are you doing, comrade?
Comrade?
Comrade Rob.
Yes,
isn't that fitting?
I'm well. Well, hopefully Stops will sorted there. At the moment, he's having some feedback issues. I'm not sure if they are sorted yet.
Stop spamming the hum.
Yes. Good. Anything else to report? How's your week been? Anything to report from your side?
No, I'm having a hectic period, so I haven't.
How is any news on your side? How is Islam integrating and fitting in your neck of the woods?
I don't know. I haven't really followed the news so much. I'm maybe following the Middle East more than. But yeah, I don't. There's as I said, I followed Middle East more.
Okay, fair enough. By the way, if you're watching us and you enjoy the show, please give us a few thumbs up. That would be much appreciated. And if you don't want to tell us why you think you're not happy, by the way, if you know any Muslims, or if you are somebody that wants to join us in the conversation, then let us know in the comments. What you need to do is type in the Jinn and Tonic Show. I will show you and I'll post it in the comments. Type the Jinn and Tonic Show and then a question or a comment so that we can see it. Otherwise, potentially your comments are between each other. But if you want to get our attention, then please type in the Jinn and Tonic Show as I've typed it into the chat there. And that'll be highlighted so myself, Stops, or Abu can see it. Good. Stops, are you sorted there, my good sir?
I think the German government is blocking him.
Yes, maybe somebody's hacking.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir. Now we can't again. Now you're all quiet. Say something else.
Can't hear me.
There you go. Now I can hear you.
No, I've got a delay still. I don't believe it.
It's okay. Just stop your. I mean, I've got the video up here that we can use just now anyway. So maybe just stop your minicam and just use your normal audio. That should sort it, hopefully.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
What's happening? What have you been talking about so far?
Just done some crazy comments, which I think you got the tail end of those.
Okay, brilliant.
Yep, we can hear you. Can you hear us okay? You're not getting an echo now? All good your side?
Yeah, but not when I'm talking.
You're still getting feedback when you're talking. Oh, yeah.
I'm talking and then half an hour later my voice comes through.
I wonder if it's anything to do with my side here. I'm going to change something here and see if that makes any difference for you. It shouldn't though, but who knows? Okay, does that make any difference for you now? Just talk and see if that does anything. Can you hear yourself feedback now?
This is driving me crazy. Unbelievable.
Okay, so it's not you then. I'm going to set my thing back here again.
Okay, let me talk. Do you hear something now?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me? Apologies for this. Stops is having some audio issues, as you might or might not hear. Can you hear me okay now? You're still getting feedback?
I can hear you, but when I say something,
Okay, so it's not.
I don't understand why. I've never had this situation before, and I don't know how to fix it.
So you're hearing yourself feedback. Are you sure it's not the live thing you haven't muted? Just check the live viewing where you can see the live chat and make sure that's muted. That could be the issue. Sometimes I forget that, and so you have to go mute the live.
No, that's not it. I'm talking now, and then like 30 seconds later, then it comes through.
Well, I don't know how you can be hearing yourself there. If you switched off Minicam and in Google Hangouts, you've set the audio to your mic and the speakers to your headphones or whatever you're using, I don't know how it's possible you can be hearing yourself. Apologies. We do want to get Stops working here because going forward, obviously, we'd like him to be able to participate and not be driven crazy. None of us can hear.
I don't understand.
What's the problem? I can hear. Stop spamming.
Okay, can you hear anything now?
Yeah, I mean, we can hear you, but we're not hearing your echo that you're talking about. So you're coming through fine.
But the echo is just in his.
Yeah.
If you turn like if you're wearing a headset or something, you can. Oh, of course, then he can't hear us.
I've got the echo, and when I'm talking, you can hear me, but then it's half an hour later.
Ah, okay.
That's very frustrating.
That's weird. Do you have any like? Do you have some system that is processing the sound?
I think he had Minicam running in some way or other. Hopefully you've stopped it. Maybe disconnect, stop, and reconnect again. So disconnect from the Hangout.
At the moment, no.
Maybe restart the computer.
I completely switched off Minicam.
Are you sure that there's a delay?
See if you can leave the Hangout and rejoin again. You've got the link in Skype. See if that makes any difference. He stopped out now.
I don't think he hears us, but
no, he's hopped out now.
We can just restart the computer.
Before we carry on, obviously we want to have him join. So what we're going to chat about, Abu, as you are well aware, is non-believers in Islam. What's the sort of status of non-believers? What does Islam say? And obviously there'll be different views, etc.
The Prophet said,
okay, if you would just sort of start us off, and Stops will join us, when you were studying, and remind people, firstly, if you're okay with that, just remind people where you originally studied. And as a broad brush, when you were studying, what was, generally speaking, the view, if you had to give a global view of how non-believers were seen where you were studying?
No, well, I was a Wahhabi. So, or what they call, I don't like the word Wahhabi, but just so people know what I was a Salafi, studying that kind of, but you can just read the hadiths, so it's a very kind of literal interpretation, so you just read the hadith and so on. The hadith is quite clear, like the Prophet Muhammad said, "Man baddala dinahu faqtuluh," and that is a Sahih hadith in, I think it's Sahih Muslim and many places. The one who changes his religion, meaning leaving Islam, kill him. And then there's a lot of hadith about
context. Hang on, Abu. I mean, the apologist will say, no, that's context. That's context.
Yeah, you can make, but then you can go into the fiqh when you can kill believers and so on. And I think the view that I was taught, or the like mainstream, is that you can't like randomly go around in kuffar countries and kill non-believers. But if you're in an Islamic state, say for example, whatever is Islamic state, not just ISIS, but any Islamic state with an Islamic ruler, then if you leave the religion, you can talk to that person, but if he refuses to come back to the religion, then you execute him. And I think the method that you should use, if I remember this correctly, is beheading by sword.
Before we carry on, I just want to see Stops. Welcome back. Or is it working now for you?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Okay, everything's back to normal. You know what it was? It was the link that you sent me on Skype, which was running all the time on live.
That's what I said to you, but obviously I said to you, you had the live link in the background somewhere that wasn't.
Yeah, but no, it was a different one. I had three. I had two. I had the normal one, which was muted, because I always muted, but it was the one on Skype, which you normally never send me. And now for the first time I did, and I've totally forgot about it. But it's okay now.
Okay, good stuff. Good. So we're back. Stops is with us. The audio issue has been overcome. Right, good. So let's continue then. So Abu was talking about his view, Stops, which I think you hopefully you heard.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and this is 100%. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't memorized all the fiqh like from the top of my head, but there are like fiqh books that go into detail, and it's like jurisprudence, like with all the evidence for the different rulings and so on. So I don't remember every single ruling, but I remember the general idea. Here you have a link. In ISIS propaganda magazine,
Yeah, hang on. I'll read this in a moment.
Can I just make a point? Because Dawn Lopez is making a very, very, very valid point. So I just want to clarify something. Here on the Jinn&Tonic show, we do not per se go and say, well, we don't really know whether Muhammad existed. We know that there is no evidence for the existence of gods, Muhammad, Jesus, Moses, and blah, blah, blah. But if we take the basis that we don't know, then we are sort of invalidating our own basis for existence. And therefore, what we are doing is we're saying, for the sake of the argument that we are making on the show, we are saying we accept the Islamic viewpoint that Muslims believe that Muhammad existed and that the Quran was sent down in bits and pieces. So these are the assumptions that we make. But it's true, we should be saying this at the beginning, that for argument's sake, we're just allowing for that.
Yeah, yep. I mean, sometimes when you have I remember when I had this long discussion with Saracen, I kind of I have one, I take the kind of more of historical revisionist side of me and put it in one box, and then the more like standard narrative in one box, so, because otherwise you confuse people. And we may not even agree. I mean, I think Stop Spamming is more on the side that Muhammad didn't exist. Is that right?
Well, I say there's no evidence to suggest that he did, yeah. Yeah,
and I'm not decided. I'm agnostic, but I think there was an historical guy.
So maybe what we can do, and I will start to ask any Muslims I find now, set them what evidence is there that Muhammad existed, and then I'll either pass it on to you, Stops, or see if I can put them in contact with you, or we can have a show with them or whatever, and they can present that. Because as you quite rightly say, we are accepting that Muhammad possibly or probably existed, and we are taking Muslims as in this is what they believe. Obviously, we do not believe that, but we're accepting that certain parts of it, at least for the conversation, if nothing else, did in fact happen, and then in examining those facts. But, you could step it back and go, okay, well, how do we know that's the case? And obviously that's your position. So perhaps it would be useful to have a Muslim on, or perhaps we could do an entire show just on the claims of how or what the evidence supposedly is, and then for you to refute that, Stops. Would that be?
Yeah, sure. But what the point that I'm trying to make is not every time that we mention the name Muhammad, we don't add, instead of the peace be upon him, we don't know whether he existed. So I'm just going to say Muhammad, and that's it. Under the caveat that I'm not sure that there is really any reason to believe that he did. And Abu and I've just realized that, agree 100%. And that is, there is no evidence, and this is why I'm always very careful when it comes to this topic. My definition is, I am saying there is no reason to believe that there is evidence for the existence of Muhammad the way that he is described in the Sunnah. Now, there was somebody that it might have been based on, some warlord, some charismatic warlord or something, absolutely, but not the way that it is described. There's no way that he could have been in Mecca. We know that for a fact. So Abu and I think we agree 100%. It's just different wording.
Okay. But even there, there's so many levels of agnosticism. I mean, for example, Tom Holland says that there are certain part of the Sirah that probably have a core of truth in it.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's very hard to say,
to ascertain which part is what.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, I just had to bring that up because it's a very valid point made in the chat, and I just want to, just bring the view across so that we all know what we're talking about.
Yes, yeah. Because we obviously, and every Muslim just accepts it as in it's like George W. Bush existed or JFK existed, and by the sounds of it, that's not necessarily the case. And obviously, I've read a part of In the Shadow of the Sword, Tom Holland's historical book that apparently took 5 years to research. It's pretty much a tome. I do the audio part because it's easier to use, but and he seems to suggest the same thing. There's a big question mark around the veracity of it because the evidence for him is much later afterwards and so on, which you guys obviously know a lot more about.
But I think he is on the view that there was an historical Muhammad. I'm a little bit.
But again, is it a historical Muhammad as in
not as he is portrayed in the Sunnah completely, but he makes an argument that there is a core truth to some parts of the Sirah, and he gives some reasons that I haven't memorized, but you can read the book. We also made this show about Islam or what's called Mecca, like a search for the historical birthplace of Islam / Mecca, or whatever we called it. And there I read that part. If you want to go back and watch it.
Yes, people can go and if they subscribe to Jinn&Tonic show, they can go and have a look at a previous show. I think that was last year at some point, where you went through that pretty well. All right, so let's add this and present this to everybody. So here's some information. Now, we have talked about this before, and again, obviously Muslims will object that ISIS in any way represents Islam. We did a show on that as well, where we came to the conclusion that it is a plausible viewpoint, a plausible interpretation. So here are some of the reasons that ISIS talk about challenging or fighting or whatever the case is. And their number one reason here is, we hate you first and foremost because you are disbelievers, you reject the oneness of Allah. So they are very clear, at least. And maybe stops and
can I
are they the only people like this, or are they in fact the Wahhabis and others that's the sole reason that they would distance themselves, if nothing else?
There is a very important concept in Islam, and that is, it's not only ISIS that have this concept, because it's kind of mentioned in the Qur'an as well, and very detailed in the Sunnah. That is called wala wal bara, meaning, I don't know how to translate exactly, but it's like the giving of loyalty and disloyalty. I don't know if that's the correct translation, but the point is that you have to hate for Allah's sake, and you're not allowed. So it's very important. I remember that I had some problems with this when I was a Muslim, because there were some kuffar that I had a problem to hate. So I went to a sheikh and talked about this, like, these kuffar, they are really nice guys, they're just ignorant kuffar, and I have a little bit of a problem hating them. And he went through like, yeah, but there's one part of you that can like some of their behavior, but you also have to hate them for Allah's sake, and so on.
Okay, but Abu, what you are saying now, I think, is that this is a central tenet here of Islam.
Yes, it's an important part of the faith. In order to have a faith, to have iman, which is this metaphysical thing that you have to have if you want to enter paradise, you have to hate and love for Allah's sake. And part of the hate you have to have for Allah's sake is that you have to hate the kuffar for their kufr, for their and their shirk, for their infidelity and their pagan polytheism, or what you call it. And so that is you have to have that to have faith.
The same way as you have to fight for Allah, even though you might hate it.
Yeah, fighting, but this is even more essential than fighting, because fighting is just an action you do.
Yeah, but it could be spiritual fighting, remember?
Yeah. Okay. But if we're talking about, like, this is maybe something that many non-Muslims don't really believe, how fundamental this is, that you have to have this wala and wal-bara. You have to have this hate and love for Allah's sakes, and that's a very core thing of the faith, of iman.
So what would be your response then, Abu, to apologists like Abbas or some of the others that says no, we can live quite happily as you do your thing, we do ours, and that's all fine? And are they referring simply to when they're in the minority, or are
Yeah,
they
yeah, there is
somehow trying to
hating
twist that,
someone.
even if they were the majority, they would still allow that?
Yeah, this is the one, like the kind of interesting thing, that you can and even should sometimes treat kuffar well. Not because you love them, because you have to hate them, but you should treat them well so that you are a good ambassador for Islam, for example. So, for example,
Treat them well, though, being a good ambassador for Islam.
like, for example, see that you see an elderly person and that person is a kafir, you might help that elderly person, like said, you're sitting on a train, for example, and if you're a young man, you can give that person your seat, even though that person is a kafir, because that is a kind of dawah to that kafir. But you also have to hate that kafir because he is a kafir. So it's a bit I don't know what word you should use, but it's
that seems contradictory to me. I mean, if you hate somebody, you're not going to perform a morally good action.
But there is a logic to it. I mean, it's the same way as, like, it's there is a kind of logic to it, that you have to treat them well, but in your heart you should also hate them for their kufr.
Okay, that's when you use the word logic, I attempt to use understand to be logic, and that seems to be.
It seems to be contradictory, but
yes.
you separate the deeds of the heart and the deeds of action. So,
but isn't that being sort of disingenuous in a sense?
Not really. I mean, you can say it's the same way.
Let me ask you this.
It is allowed to Islam if you're being tortured. Say that you're being severely tortured. That's the question. Are you allowed to say that you're no longer a Muslim?
No. I'm not talking about that. Just use the example.
But I'm going to explain why there's a difference between the deed of the heart and the deed of your action. So if you're being tortured and so on, and you can't control yourself, you're not becoming a kafir by like saying that you no longer believe in God or whatever. But the better thing to do is not to reject your belief and to die as a martyr. But you're not becoming a kafir if you're like tortured and so on. But when you're saying like that I don't believe in God, you should not believe in it with your heart. You should just say it.
Sure. Okay, I understand you can lie about that. That's totally understandable. Go back to the point where the seat. So you are giving up your seat when you hate the kafir in your heart, and so your heart, you're doing one thing, but your actions are doing something else. To me, that's like hypocritical. So why?
It is hypocritical, but it's deliberately hypocritical. It's hypocritical because if that lady, because she sees the Muslim doing a good deed to her, she becomes interested in Islam and then she converts to Islam, then that is a form of dawah.
That is the point. That is the point. You're not being a hypocrite. You're actually presenting yourself as a role model for Islam, even though inside and in reality you hate them. So it's not being seen as being hypocritical. It's being a good ambassador for Islam.
Okay, but if you were intellectually and honest and you had integrity.
You said the operative word, if.
Yeah, because then you would go, do you know what? I'm giving you the seat. I do actually hate you, but I'm giving you the seat because by giving you the seat, hopefully you'll see my action as a good one, even though I'm telling you I hate you, and maybe you'll come to Islam. That would be the...
Yeah, but I'm not sure that it should... The important part is not that they tell that they hate them.
No, I know, but
it's that they hate them with their heart.
To be honest, you go, do you know what? I hate you because you don't believe, but I want to offer you the seat. And the reason I'm offering the seat is not because I like you, but because I hope that by doing this gesture, you might be fooled, in a sense, into believing that I'm doing a good action, even though I hate you. I'm not really doing a good action. What I'm doing is hoping that by doing this good action, I fool you into believing I've done something good, and you will then join Islam. Because that would be the intellectual.
There is a very important part to the equation here, that you're actually doing a good deed to that person, because think about it. If the Muslim worldview is true, that everybody that don't die on the Islamic faith will spend an eternity in hellfire, which is very, very not nice, then you're actually doing a good deed to that person, because if that person becomes a Muslim, then that person will not spend an eternity in hellfire.
But what about the view that hey, if you don't hear the message, you can still go to heaven? Some Muslims believe that. Now, again, tell me to what degree that's.
But there is the truth to that. But I think most scholars says that if you're living in our time, you will at some point have heard about Islam, and you will have had the opportunity to research it and so on. So in this age, there's no excuse. But for example, in Scandinavia, we had a people called the Sami people. I actually have the Sami language on this computer, but anyway, and they live in the north of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. And they didn't really have any contact, at least not like 1,000 years ago, with Muslim civilization. Well, there is a possibility, because they had contact with the Vikings, and the Vikings had contact with Muslims. So there is a small possibility. But let's say that they had never heard about Islam in any way. Then there's going to be a test on the day of judgment, where they will be presented with a fire, and God's ordered them to jump into the fire. And the ones who jump into the fire will go to paradise, and the ones who refuses will go to hell. So in that case, there is a special case. But in our time, I think most scholars says that.
Yeah, well, we don't care what scholars say. I mean, there's probably billions of people that have heard the word Islam but know nothing more about it. It's the same as hearing the word.
But it's also like, you're living in this world, and you should think for yourself, okay, who created me, blah, 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 blah. And then you should research, because you have this fitra of Tawheed, this fitra of monotheism, and then you should research for yourself. So you have a kind of responsibility to research and so on. It's a little bit, I mean, to be devil's advocate, I mean, even in Western laws, not knowing about a law is not an excuse for not committing a crime. So it's a bit weird. We have a huge law book probably in Britain that consists of every law, and you probably don't know every law unless you're a lawyer or something. But you're still obligated to follow the law. So there's not an excuse to say, well, I didn't know that. So, for example, say that is it illegal to smoke weed in Britain, for example? I don't know. Is it? It's illegal, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I know.
But you can go to the court and say, "Oh, I didn't know that." Because that's not an excuse. I mean, I'm trying to be devil's advocate here, but I'm not trying to say that this is a logical way of viewing things. But I want to say that this is like the majority view.
Yeah, I'd like to add something. We need to remember that Islam is a highly let's call it selfish ideology, because everything is towards me. So I'm the one who needs to get some good points, and I need to get into a good standing so that I can get to paradise much sooner, and to a higher level of paradise, because remember, there's different levels. So what people are trying to do is, even though they hate the people in the tram or the bus or whatever, they will still get up, because they are thinking that they will get bonus points should that guy ever start thinking, this is a well-behaved Muslim, maybe I should look into it. And then maybe if he should at some stage convert, then he gets the 2,500 bonus points.
Correct. Correct. It's not just one, but it's like every deed he does, you get that reward too. So every time he prays, you get the reward of his praying. Like it doubles. So like he gets the reward and you get the reward as well.
Like and a pyramid scheme.
Hajj, yes, and if you make Hajj, he gets the reward and you get the reward as well.
Like the Atari games where you get a bonus, you know.
Yeah. So for example, like Imam al-Bukhari, for example, who have made this hadith collection, every time someone prays based on that hadith collection, Imam Bukhari gets the reward. That's the logic.
Yeah.
And if you convert someone to Islam, you get the points that he is getting.
By the way, where are these points? Where are the points to be found? Like the system and the points
are to be found there are angels that are writing things down, but also Allah knows everything. So Allah has Allah is
Where's this written
similar
down?
to some.
This whole process happens.
I mean, there's one thing that is written down, and that is in Lawh al-Mahfud. This before Allah created the world, He created Lawh al-Mahfud, which is this golden tablets, something like that. That was written. What everything that would happen in creation until the Day of Judgment was written down before it happened. So God predetermined everything. So it means that God decided before you were created that you were going to hell or hellfire. And according to an hadith that exists at least in At-Tirmidhi, 999 out of 1,000 humans will go to hellfire.
Yes, I wouldn't want to put us on a sidetrack of trying to explain how one has free will when everything's been decided by the Great One.
I would argue that Islam rejects free will.
Muslims don't accept it, but that's a topic for another day.
I've even made a video about that: free will in Islam, Islamic compatibilism.
Pop that in the chat for people to have a look at. That'll be interesting. Let's carry on with a few more of these. Obviously, we can discuss as we go. Stops, if you want to add anything, by all means. You're uncharacteristically quiet there. Or maybe it's just...
I was doing fine. No, I agree.
Abba is just like suddenly it's just so full of energy here. It's amazing.
Full of energy. I'm totally...
I can see that.
Probably the opposite. I'm tired. It's probably my prefrontal cortex is shutting down, and I'm just having.
You're running on. All right, let's do a few more of these. Again, as a reminder, these are ISIS views, and I'm sure some Muslims will reject these. But there are other views here. The reason they hate the non-believers is because your secular would obviously apply to those who live in secular societies as opposed to Christian or Hindu or other views, but presumably that would have an effect anyway. But this one is specifically to your secular liberal societies permit the very things that Allah has prohibited. In the case of the atheist fringe, I like the fringe bit, we hate you and wage war against you because you disbelieve. Presumably, though, they do the same to Christians and Hindus and everybody else because they disbelieve in their particular religion.
No. Christians and Jews, Zoroastrians and blah, 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 they are one step better because at least they believe.
Yeah, but they don't believe in... Okay, so they've obviously got a hierarchy there. But how much better are they?
Better is a bit like they have a special ruling in this life. So you don't, if that you can see, for example, the Islamic State, how they treated Christians differently from Yazidis, for example. So they consider Yazidis to be pagans, so they treat them differently from how they treat Christians. But I'm not entirely sure that Christians necessarily will have a lesser punishment in hellfire, because that depends on other factors as well. So if you're a really, really evil Christian that fight Islam and, I don't know, is Tommy Robinson a Christian, for example?
Not sure, to be honest. Probably, I would imagine.
Let's say that he is a Christian. Or what is called Robert Spencer. Is it that?
Yes, he's Christian as far as I know. And so
he's going to get a very, very bad punishment in hellfire, maybe even worse than many pagans, because he's a Christian, but he's fighting Islam. And so there's many factors.
Yeah. Okay. And then there's a few other reasons they hate you here. For your crimes against Islam, you mock the faith. We hate you for the crimes against Muslims. We hate you for invading our lands. This particular reason for hating you is secondary, hence the reason we addressed it at the end of their list. The fact is, even if you were to stop bombing us, we would continue to hate you because our primary reason for hating you, you will not cease until you embrace Islam. So again, just to clarify then, this view of hating you because you are not, because you disbelieve in Allah, to what degree would you say, between the two of you guys, that view is held by Muslims in general? Have you got any sort of idea in terms of the 1.7 billion Muslims, just ballpark figure, have you got any idea how many people would either quietly or not quietly hold that sort of view?
This is two. Like, we hate you because you're secular liberal societies.
No. So I'm talking about the primary reason here, which is because you're a non-believer. Essentially, our primary reason for hating you is that you will not cease until you embrace Islam. So they hate you because you do not embrace Islam. So how many would you say? Is there any ideas on?
I mean, that is important. That is impossible to say, because hate is a kind of a condition of the brain. So it's like your amygdala activates in a specific way and so on. So you can't know that for sure unless you kind of put them in fMRI scans and do.
They'd have to ask the question. They'd have to ask the question differently, though, because I suspect.
No, because but there, I want to say, there is the doctrine of wala wal bara, that it's obligated to hate the kuffar for their kufar. But then there's the point: do they really do this? And that is very hard to know.
That's what I'm saying. It would be unlikely if you ask the question, do you hate non-believers purely because they are not part of Islam? I would suspect you would get a skewed result there, in the sense of Muslims say no to that question. But if you phrase the question differently, in some way where you don't ask the question so bluntly, then possibly that there'd be more people who would accept it. So if you said something, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I also think there's a difference.
Are non-believers? How do you feel towards non-believers? Fully accepting that they're the same as you, less accepting, rejecting they're lower than you. You could have that style. That's often how the Pew. They don't ask it as a single answer. They give you, different scales for the response. So if they ask it in that way, you might find more Muslims saying, well, no, they're not equal to us. They're lower, but we don't hate them, or whatever. So you'd still get a sense of it, but maybe not quite using the word hate, for example.
I also think it depends on who asked the question. If the local imam asked them that question, do you hate the kuffar? They might say, yes, of course. But if a kafir asked them that question, then he might say, oh, then they're going to give you an ambiguous answer.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, you will get 100% for the question number 6, or the statement number 6. We hate you for invading our lands. Absolutely. This has been hammered into the people that we, the West, even if you're from Japan or New Zealand, you're still the West, invaded their lands. What their lands is, nobody really knows. And the whole history of why and what and how is irrelevant. It's been hammered into their heads that we are invading their lands, and it's unjust. And this is why they're the victims.
Yes, and that, of course, goes back to the age-old question. Well, at what point did it become their lands? What happened when they took it over from somebody else? Wasn't it somebody else's land before their land? And so on and so on.
I would like to add here that the more kind of puritanical kind of Salafi, real Salafi, they would say that is secondary. If you like, because invading a land is something that is tied to dunya. Yes, there is an obligation for Muslims to protect the lands that once was under Muslim rule. And there's a hadith about this, and we can go into that later. But a real hardcore Salafi that knows his stuff, he's going to say that wala wal bara in general is more important than that. You shouldn't get too tied into this, like umur dunya, these things about the dunya. So, because you shouldn't love the land per se. You're loving God, and the land is just kind of protecting the land is just a manifestation of loving God. But it's loving God and loving and hating for God's sake that is the important.
Okay, but again, what lands? Because presumably, are you saying they should?
All lands that once was
ever invaded, or like just Arabia, or what?
All lands. So, for example, Bosnia, like southern Spain. All lands that under one period of time was under Muslim control.
Yeah, which wasn't their lands. They invaded.
I can find that hadith.
Yeah, find that hadith as you
if I can, but maybe can have it as hadith of the day. It takes a long time to find it.
Okay, cool. Let's have a look at their status. There's many verses here, and we just talk about some of them. And again, give us your thoughts on these. So, Quran 3:110. You true believers in Islamic monotheism and real followers of Muhammad and his Sunnah are the best of peoples ever raised up for mankind.
Yeah, this is Quran. I don't know, like what is in Quran?
This is the supremacy.
Yes.
كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تؤمنون بالمعروف. So you are the people is maybe not Ummah means they used to translate it as nation, but maybe tribe or something. Your origin.
It's the believers. I think that's the main. This is the Muslim believers that are the best of people, right?
Yeah. So this nation, but this is also in contrast that this nation is even better than the nation of Jesus and the nation of Moses.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
in general, not that all Muslims today are better than all the believers of the time of Musa, but the Ummah in general.
Yeah.
But I think Ummah is not people. Is I don't like that translation, but it's not important.
And then sort of the opposite of that, Quran 8:55. Again, there's multiple translations. The worst of creatures are those who disbelieve. Now, again, do you guys ever get the response from apologists that these are to be taken at a very specific time? This is not to be used generally.
No. They are the worst. They are worse than animals, because animals they are, and it's even like in Surah Al-Baqarah, what is it? The point, they are worse than cattle. But the point is, disbelievers are worse than animals, for example, because animals, they don't have any choice to believe or not believe. They are just living their fitra, and they don't have the cognitive capacity to make any choices. So on the judgment day, they will just become dirt. But believers, they had the opportunity to believe in God and so on, but they choose not to. Although God predetermined everything, so you might think this is a bit contradictory, which it is, but therefore they are the worst of creatures.
Contradictory.
They really are worst. They are evil.
Here as well, Quran 4:101. The disbelievers are ever unto you open enemies.
Yes, this is a verse that is tied to this, what I called wala wal bara. There are many verses like that. This is not only in. So you have to have animosity towards kuffar and mushrikeen, but in certain situations, like when you're in a Muslim, if you live in the land of kuffar, like in UK, for example, as I said, you might treat them well in order to make dawah and so on, but you have to have animosity to them in your heart.
Yeah, and maybe it's worth pointing out that a high percentage of the Quran addresses non-believers.
Yes, that's right, isn't it? What is it? Bill Warner worked it out. Something in the region of 65% or more that focuses on that. Astonishing.
Nah, that's a bit high. I think the way that he works is the sentences which address spiritual beliefs, out of that, a higher portion is addressing non-believers. Because if you take the entire Quran, no.
Well, maybe he's including the surah as well. I can't remember. I think there is a graph. I mean, I'll have a look for it at some point when I finish here, if you remind me, because I think it's available here somewhere in this document as well. So I'll have a look and see what that says. Quran 25:44. Do you think that most of them hear or understand? They are like cattle. There you were talking about it, animals. Nay, they are even further astray from the path. even worse than
Yeah, this is similar to the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah I was talking about. Or I think it's even the same words. Yeah, so they are worse than cattle, but this is more like God insulting kuffar in general.
Yes, I mean, but if you're a Muslim and you hear these sort of things, then especially if you inculcate it from a young age, then you are going to look upon anybody that's a non-Muslim in these terms. Now, whether you express that, as you say, verbally or in some other way, or whether you're just thinking it, this is being.
What I want to say is that, okay, maybe this becomes ambiguous, but what I say is this ayah in itself may not be a proof that they are worse than cattle, but that they really are worse than cattle. It's so hard to explain, but this might be a metaphor that they go more astray than cattle, but the evidence that they are worse than cattle is a bit different.
Quran 98, 6-7. Again, I'm just reading the highlighted portions, but you can go and look this up yourself if you like, if you're viewing this. The people of the scripture, Jews and Christians, they are the worst of creatures. Those who believe in the oneness of Allah and His Messenger are the best of creatures. And we don't even have to look at. I mean,
this is here the translation is actually correct. They are ulaika hum khayrul bariya, I think it is. Khayrul khalq. But I think this is more exactly this the word best here. Ulaika hum khayr is correct here.
Okay. And there's some hadith there as well that one can read, which says similar things. And then again, Quran 48:29. Muhammad, those with him are hard against the disbelievers and merciful among themselves. And again, 9:28. Disbelievers are nazin. How do I pronounce that? I'm terrible with these pronunciations.
Where are you now?
We're over here. This one here. Can you see it highlighted there on the left next to the photo?
Are you looking for the Najazun?
Najazun, thank you. I just wanted to know what the pronunciation.
Najis. Is it really Najis? I think Innam al-mushrikuna najas, for example, in Surah At-Tawbah. This is Surah At-Tawbah.
I'm going to accept these.
I think Najisun, I think, is incorrect. Innam al-mushrikuna najas. The pagans are dirty, impure. I don't think it's yeah.
I'll take these as being accurate, unless you.
No. But it is accurate, but that's not the word.
But it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change the meaning. But I'm a bit.
I can see you're being a bit anal about this now to try and bring up what you consider to be a better interpretation. But
No, it's not interpretation. They are najisun. It's correct to say they are najisun if you say it in, like, if you want to explain. But that's not the word that is used in the Arabic Quran. I know this verse. This is innamal mushrikuna najisun. So najisun. Oh, no. Okay, now I understand. Okay, sorry. It's not najisun. It's najisun. Okay, sorry. It is correct. Because najisun is, if you only pronounce the word najas, in Arabic you have this weird thing that you can end the word with najisun or najasan or najisin, depending on what comes before. So it is correct.
Okay, good. You had me going there. So I've never been to Arabia, Saudi Arabia. I don't know. Have either of you guys been? Obviously, here's the big sign showing.
I live in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, yeah, of course you do. Yeah. And you've been as well, Stops?
Yeah,
Kent?
but I've never actually been to Mecca. I've never been to Medina.
I've been to Mecca. And I probably traveled on that road as well.
Can you? How do they know whether you're Muslim or not? Though, if you went there, you had a turban on, you said, "I'm Muslim."
Oh, this is the problem. You can tell them anything that you want. Like the test that they did in Nairobi. Remember, they said, "Well, what is Muhammad's mother's name?" And if you don't know it's Amina, they shoot you.
Right.
Really
Okay.
rudimentary.
You'd have to know some basic things, in other words.
No, they don't test you. They don't check you.
Oh.
Anybody who's crazy enough to go, because remember, you have to go into this funny status, and you have to wear these funny clothes. And if you run around there, I mean, you'd be really stupid to go and do this.
There was a funny story. I don't know if I remember this correctly. There was some American businessman that was very interested in history. So he did many crazy things. I think he was one of the guys that discovered that Troy is a real historical city, or helped discovering that. But he also had some idea to go to Mecca. So he actually went there. But this was like back in the 19th century or early 20th century.
Maybe they're a bit more strict in some way, but as you say, stops that you can still seemingly get in there in there if you claim to be a Muslim.
You could probably, but
well, you guys have a better chance than me.
Well, if they lift your skirt and check that you're not circumcised, you've got a problem.
Yeah, but that was actually one of the good thing. He actually circumcised. So
oh, okay.
This guy and this crazy businessman. Yeah, but on the other hand, if they do that, you can say no, you're not allowed to show your aura.
I wonder what would be said, guys. Here's this picture here again with the non-Muslims that side. Imagine that we said Muslims go that way. If you were going into London,
I was just gonna make that point, because it's actually quite devastating what we see here.
But this, nobody bats an eyelid at. But imagine this being done in any Western country where you say, Muslims, you go that way. You can't go into the city, the center of London. You've got to go around the outskirts.
Yeah.
I mean,
there wasn't it like in the US in the early 20th century that you had seats for blacks and you had seats for whites.
In South Africa, yeah, absolutely.
But what we're talking about today, and this, of course, is happening today, isn't it? I mean, and nobody bats an eyelid. Everybody goes, well, yeah, of course. You know, Muslims can have the special places, but anywhere else in a Western country, nope, that would never go. And I'm sure Muslims would kick up a stink, but would they kick up a stink there? No. You know, the double standard.
I have heard stories, people they're like, if I found out that a Christian entered Mecca, I would beat him up. And I've heard those stories in Mecca and so they really. That would really insult them, because they really think that kuffar are najas, and if they are going in there and being impure, they are.
Yeah, but I mean, we also need to face reality. I mean, I thought this is brilliant. The guy who took a piece of paper in there, and it's A4, so it's not a tiny piece of it, it's a big piece of paper. He wrote on there atheist, and then he goes and does a selfie holding this piece of paper and in front of the Kaaba. So I think this is brilliant that people are doing that.
Yeah, there are.
That's dodgy, isn't it? I mean, what would happen?
Of course it is. Imagine if you get caught. Yeah. That's not a good idea.
Yeah, that's a bit risky.
So what does Allah think of non-believers and how they should be treated? Quran 30:45. He likes not the disbelievers. Quran 3:32. Allah loveth not those who reject the faith. Quran 4:101. The disbelievers are ever unto you open enemies. Quran 2:98. Allah is an enemy to those who reject faith. Quran 64. There has started between us and you hostility and hatred forever until you believe in
that. But there's a lot missing.
That surah is important if you want to study Wala wal Bara, Surah 60 there. It's not that long.
Okay.
But the thing is that there are 105 sentences missing, because I counted 105, which all say that the disbelievers will taste hellfire.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I guess,
very
he's obviously not giving everything here.
No. He's
105. I mean, bloody hell.
Yeah. It's astonishing, isn't it? How much is focused on the disbeliever. I mean, if this is a book to tell people what to do, and this amount of information is telling people what they shouldn't do, or telling us how bad the disbeliever is.
I mean, look at the Christians with their 10 commandments. Are they 10 commandments? No, they also tell you what not to do.
Yeah, example 613, I think it is, isn't it?
No, those are the laws. Those are the Jewish laws. But the 10 commandments. I mean, do not do this, do not do that. And they're called commandments.
So here is, again, this may be obscure, but I'll read just part of it anyway, because again, I'm always cautious that Muslims will immediately, anything that's not in the Quran and certain hadiths, they will just say, no, we don't accept that, or there's controversy. And so that there's easy ways for them to sidestep any of these sort of things. But here was some Islamic ruling, a fatwa. For the sake of Allah, he has stated that friendship can only be among the believers and enmity is to be between them and the kafar, disbelievers. Disavowing them is one of the basic principles of their faith and is part of perfecting their religious commitment. There are very many verses, as you've said, in hadiths and comments on the early generation to this effect.
Yeah, but you can wipe all of this. Remember, there's a sentence in the Quran which says there's no compulsion in Islam, in religion. So you can wipe all of this out.
Okay, but drop the other shoe then. Stop.
No.
That isn't it? Come on, then. For those who might actually think that that's all there is to it, because we hear that all the time, isn't it?
But this is the claim. This is what Muslims do. They tell you we can wipe all this because it says there's no compulsion in religion.
Compulsion and not compulsion has nothing to do with like enmity and what you're. This fatwa that you read is a fatwa about wala wal bara. And if you want to read more about wala wal bara, there are many books that speaks about this, and there are many verses in the Quran. This is one of the things that is very clearly kind of elaborated on in the Quran itself. It's not like.
And the other one, to you yours, to me mine, to you yours.
What?
The other one that is always brought up, to you, we can't fight and we should be friends because to you your religion and to me mine.
Like ayyuhal kafirun.
Can you guys between the
lakum dinukum waliya din, like and to you are your religion and to us. Yes, but that is not that doesn't negate wala wal bara. That is yes, that you have your religion, I have mine, and that is just a statement that you want that you will be stubborn upon your own belief.
Yeah, let's go have a brew.
Yeah,
more like a truism. So they're saying something that's obviously true again, but there's a connotation behind it that the apologists then put forward, isn't it? And the inference is, the explanation is, hey, that means that you can have yours, I can have mine, we can live peacefully all together. But that
I also made a video about this no compulsion in religion. Maybe I can find it too. We also made a whole show about it.
Yeah.
This no compulsion in religion is I hear that so many times.
You're being holier than the Pope again. Don't be so nitpicky.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I think we get that. But please, can you explain to people who are viewing the response that you would give? So if a Muslim said to you, for example, Stops and Abu, but hey, what about this this no compulsion in religion and your religion and to me mine? I mean, clearly, that suggests that Islam is peaceful. And so, all these other verses, I mean, those were for specific times and places. But here we have a couple of verses that are universal, and that just shows that Islam is a religion of peace.
I mean, I don't think they believe that themselves. The tragic thing is that
what I want from you is not what you think about them, but respond to them. What would you say? Would you accept that, or would you reject it? And if you did reject it, why and how?
Okay, first I just want to say that the same people that knows that it's kind of, they know what they're saying is false. Even they use it in a kind of devious way. It's like a semi or quasi taqiyya. Like so I think they know that it's kind of false, but they use it anyway because they think it's for a good sake. I don't know.
Why do they know?
It's because I think many of even the shuyukh that are using this no compulsion in the religion stuff, they kind of know that this is not valid. This it doesn't address this issue, but they're using it anyway. But anyway, if I would say, okay, they are using there's no compulsion in religion, according to what? About wala wal bara? No compulsion in religion has nothing to do with wala wal bara, and some scholars says that the no compulsion in religion stuff is abrogated by the verse of the sword, and those who said that it's not abrogated, that they you can go and watch the video. It's better than we take this.
There's two ways. Why are you making it complicated? Come on. There's two approaches. One is either you accept abrogation or you don't. If you do accept it, well, then it was abrogated. If you don't accept it, it doesn't make sense, because there are so many sentences in the Quran which tell you the exact opposite. So all you've done now is you found a contradiction in the Quran. That's it. End of story.
No. It's not that simple.
Abbas on a roll tonight.
There's a small minority of Muslims who don't believe in abrogation in general, but they are a very tiny minority, to the extent that they exist at all. And then you have, in this particular case, is this verse abrogated or not? And then some of the scholars says, yes, it's abrogated. It's abrogated. This was an early verse that was abrogated by the later verse, in specifically the verse of the sword, ayat save. But then there are scholars that says, no, this is not abrogated, but there is kind of what is called tafsir to it. There is like, so they kind of explain it. Go and watch the video. This is a long story. Go and watch the video. There is no compulsion in religion, Islam. What does it really mean? I posted it in the link. Okay.
All right. Are we good?
Yes.
Okay. Right. All right. So clearly, between the two of you, Stops gave the short version. You gave the slightly longer version. Those verses cannot be pressed into service in the way that some Muslim apologists do, that just off the cuff, the way they want to make it sound as if it's all hunky-dory and everybody can live together and it's great. Because that's the off-the-cuff remarks that they sometimes make when they've got nothing else to say, or, that's the first thing that pops into their head. And they specifically say that, obviously, to people who don't know any of these things, and often that's done in, Speaker's Corner. But I suspect they would not attempt to do that to you or Stops, for example, and try and use that because you would respond as you have now.
I don't know. They might think that we're ignorant, but then they're going to get there. Then we will
respond, and they'd probably find out.
Whip their asses.
Again, there's many of these. Quran 356. As
the French.
Those who disbelieve, I will punish them with a severe torment in this world. Okay. What torment?
Okay, now we're getting to the ones that I was talking about. Exactly.
And what? Okay, and so what punishment is being referred to in this world? Because clearly, how does Allah punish in this world? Clearly, he punishes in the other world or the next world. Presumably, punishment is he's directing his followers to do some punishment, because he's not personally doing it himself, is he?
Well, yes, because the thing is, you can get punished here by, contracting cancer, by having your kids killed and things like that. That is then seen as a form of punishment.
Natural events are Allah's punishment.
Yeah, it's like if you take 1313, for example, where thunder is being used to kill people when God is angry with you.
How does thunder kill people? Just as a side note there.
It's a mistake in the Quran.
So is it supposed to be lightning, or what is it supposed to be?
No. There are two different words. One is lightning, the other one is thunder, and here it's thunder. Well, just take Abu, take him to 1313, and that's it.
Okay. Maybe, but hang on, Stops. I will play devil's advocate. that's probably just allegorical, or it's metaphorical. It's obviously just the wrath of God, and that's the word thunder that's been used. And as you've said, it can manifest itself in unforeseen ways that look as if it's natural, but actually it's the will of Allah.
Of course.
Okay.
But the fact that you need to explain yourself like that already shows me that this is not the word of a God. I would be embarrassed to call myself God if I come up with such a stupid concept.
I'm doing my best here. I'm doing my best.
You would make a lousy God.
I know, but I'm probably okay apologist. Wouldn't you say? I'm doing the best I can to explain this in some way that doesn't sound completely nuts.
Yeah, but it shows you that us humans, us puny humans, would make much better gods than the gods that we have.
Well, yes, which, again, is just a nail in the coffin that this was written by a God. However, we'll come onto a video hopefully on that. The beauty of the Quran's writing and its poetry and recitation and all of that sort of stuff is just stunningly brilliant, that non-believers have become Muslims because of the literacy brilliance of the Quran. So we are obviously missing something here.
Yep, we're missing the ALM.
Yes, I've asked people about that. I've never had a particularly good response, as you said, because there probably isn't one. There's another one here, Quran 8:60. Strike terror into the hearts of enemies of Allah and your enemies and others besides, whom ye may not know, but whom Allah doth know. So, but again, I'm pretty sure that any Muslim apologist will say, no, that's only in times of war, and that's justified if you are being attacked.
And you need to be an enemy, an outspoken enemy. So just a critic will not suffice.
No. I think I can't. I'm not 100% sure, but I think there is something to it that this is in a situation of war, but the enemies of Allah is not necessarily only in war. So it's a little bit of how do you say tafsir?
Somebody in the chat is saying there, I know Surah 8:60 is when the pagans of Ud were cast terror into their hearts, which made them run away, according to the Surah. According to that particular person.
But there is a turhibu aduwi wa aduwakum. That is terrorize my enemies and yours. Anyway, but
I always think when I'm reading these verses, I always think, okay, what would an apologist say to this? And most often, of course, in my mind, they will respond that it's either in a specific circumstance only or it's in defense. It's not as if they're just going out there and doing that. Will be their response, obviously. And at no point are they going to, as far as I can tell, ever acknowledge that Muhammad or any of these verses or Allah suggested that people should just go out there willy-nilly and do this to non-believers. They will never acknowledge that.
Sometimes there is a we call it grain of truth in it, but the truth is somewhere in between. Like defensive jihad, yes, if a land of if kuffar, say that the Byzantines, for example, attacks the Muslim ummah, then you have to fight defensive jihad. Yes, but you also have to make jihad in order to spread the faith, like the Muslims did to Egypt and West Africa and to Persia and so on.
Yeah, but you could get the modern Muslims who are going, no, those were not real Muslims, and so today we wouldn't do that. And so not every Muslim is a good Muslim, and those were bad Muslims who invaded. It's not that's not what's been taught. And so you would enter lands, you'd be happy with everybody else, and you would want to share the faith in a very peaceful manner, like Dawah in Speaker's Corner, for example.
Yeah, you can say that, but I mean, you can say that the moon is flat also. I mean,
yeah, but again, there's a contradiction in the Quran, because the Quran says very clearly, I am clear, everything is explained, and Allah has made everything very clear to you, everything is there. We see it's not.
Look, the guys that are saying that, I doubt that they really believe that themselves. I mean,
No, it's the Quran.
no. But I mean, the guys that are denying jihad.
Okay, yeah.
Like, I don't think that they really believe it in themselves. They are. That's like the peak of intellectual dishonesty. Like they're dishonest to themselves and dishonest to others. I mean, like.
Well, here's another one. Quran 9:30. Jews, Christians who disbelieved, Allah's curse be on them. So as we can see, as we read through these, there's just so many verses in here, and it stops. You've highlighted already 105, I think you said. And here's just some of them. Yeah, obviously, we'd be talking about it all night if we had to go through all 105 of them. But there's just so many verses here that one can pick out of the Quran where, there's unpleasantness directed towards non-believers, be them Christians, Jews, or some other version of.
I mean, I can say
reading the Sunnah or the Tafsir or the Hadiths here. That would add.
Even the Fatiha, if you talks about Christian and Jews, in Al-Fatiha that you read, like in every prayer, in every rak'ah, in every time you stand up, you say, Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, lead us on the straight path, sirat al-ladhina an'amta alayhim, that path that you have blessed, غير المغضوب عليهم, not those who are got the anger, i.e. the Jews, غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين, and not those who are gone astray, i.e. the Christians. So in every single, every time they pray, they repeat this.
Yeah, but come on, there's 218 of these unpleasant sentences.
That's
Yeah.
Quran alone, right? Stops.
Yeah, and that's Quran. But I mean, even when they're praying, they're kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I find this part kind of interesting. I mean,
The thing is, what does the apologist say? Apologist says, yeah, but this is not what we mean. This is just a part of the ritual, just like you say the same things the Christians say. But the idea that we need to transmit to Muslim apologists is you are making the claim that you are better. You are making the claim that you are better than the Christians, so you shouldn't have to go and resort to the ideas that the Christian have and say, we are slightly better than the Christians or the same as the Christians. You should be way above what they are doing. So you should not have any of this in the Quran. If
you say that about the Christians, this is like, what's the most repeated prayer that Christians do? Is it the Lord's Prayer? Or
yes.
Our
Father, who thou art, wherever, sitting on the toilet.
Do you know the Lord's Prayer, Rob? Have you memorized it? Have you memorized it? I have memorized it in another language, but I don't know in English.
Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive those who trespass against us, or forgive us as we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Your kingdom.
Okay, so do you see that prayer talked about forgiveness and blah, 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 blah. And there's a bit of a difference there talking about غير المغضوب عليهم, not those who got the anger on them, the God's anger, God's hatred, which i.e. the Jews, and that you repeat. So there's an element of don't you see that there is at least a subtle difference there?
Yeah. And this is the point. I heard somebody make the same point and say, well, how many people did Jesus kill and how many people did Muhammad kill? So there's a huge difference there.
Yes, exactly. As far as we know, Jesus didn't directly kill anybody or order anybody. I don't know. Maybe somebody could dispute that, but as far as I know, not.
I mean, he was no angel, okay? He lied, he stole, and for me, the worst is when he bankrupted a guy because he killed all his pigs.
Who are you talking about now?
Jesus.
Jesus?
Yeah.
Where is this?
In the New Testament.
I don't know. Look, I don't know.
New Testament.
I have to.
I'm sure Stops could find it, but I tend to trust Stops has read these things. He wouldn't say things like that if it weren't true. So,
What part is
No, I'm
unclear?
not saying that I don't trust him. I just want to see it. But like the no, of course, Jesus said things that you can object to, but
I mean, he treated like his mother like shit.
but what the reason why I said that is partly because is this really in the Bible, or is it like some apostle that said it?
No, New Testament.
Okay.
All right, let's carry on here. Jesus is not the focus at the moment.
By the way, I want to point out something very, very, very important, because I get this a lot when Muslims come and they say, well, do you believe in Jesus because we love Jesus? Listen, fuck you. You do not know Jesus. You are talking about some oak who lived 1,000 years earlier. This is something that people need to understand. The Jesus in the Quran is totally different to the Jesus in the Bible, in the New Testament. They have nothing in common. The only thing, well, they have the mother's name is Mary, but other than that, there's nothing else. What we need to understand is that Mary, the mother of Jesus in Islam, is the daughter of Imran and the sister of Aaron and Moses. Okay, so that's like a cool 1,000 years earlier.
I think actually one of the things that is most interesting about the Quran, I think, or like from an historical point of view, is how Jesus is portrayed and the name that is used, which is Isa, because there's a lot of things that are lost to us today. Like in the early days of Christianity, a lot of different sects and a lot of different scriptures existed, and not all of them have survived to this day. And I kind of get the feeling that some parts of like how the Quran portrays Jesus is like a remnant of some kind of sect or scripture that existed but is lost today, and some parts seem to be, maybe you can trace it to I don't remember what sect it was, maybe the Gnostics or something.
Yeah, but Richard Carrier does that, doesn't he?
I don't remember all this from the top of my head, but there has been written things about this. So
because Carrier says that Jesus is actually an old spiritual ghost appearance from the old days as a spiritual leader from some sect or other.
I remember everything from the top of my head. I mean, this might be wrong, but
Let's get back to-
yeah, okay.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify this about Jesus because apologists bring this up a lot, and it's absolute nonsense.
Cool. He's out of the one spreading hate among Christians and among Jews. Surah Quran 5:14. Christians, we planted amongst them enmity and hatred till the day of resurrection. Quran 5:65. The Jews, we have cast among them hatred until the day of resurrection.
Yep.
Why has Allah cast hatred among them? Surely, because again, just thinking about it, if the outcome is to bring everybody to Islam, why would you create or cast hatred among them?
Jealousy.
I want to see this. What is this in Arabic? I have a feeling that this translation.
Look what the Jews were the origins, okay? And then along come the Christians, and the Christians are more successful than the Jews. And then along comes the Arabs, and they're saying we want our own version. We want to be more successful than the Christians, and they're not.
Okay, but
and then they start hating the Jews, which they are originally copying. I mean, there's a lot of sentences in the Quran which say, if you don't know what you're doing, go and ask the Jews. They know better than you do. So, initially it was all for the Jews, that he was pandering to the Jews. And then when they didn't want to play with him, then they went into opposition.
Okay. But would it not make more sense? And again, if the goal is to bring people to Islam, would it not be, almost sentences like, the Jews and the Christians just haven't got it right, and we have come to, correct them, and, we'd love to bring you to the faith, and all you need to do is believe in what we do, and we can show you why, we have the truth and you don't. It just seems to me that these sort of verses, if the goal was to bring people to Islam, these sort of verses would not necessarily bring people, it would harden their hearts, almost like Pharaoh, hardening Pharaoh's heart.
Yeah, but they do both because you also get this idea that we know better than you do because the Bible has been corrupted. You have changed it, ours is not, so therefore it makes a lot of sense to come and join us.
Yeah, but throwing hatred in among their hearts and so forth. If I was
it's a different pack.
I'd be going, hang on a moment, that seems, to put it mildly, problematic. If God actually wants me to become a Muslim, then putting hate in my heart is not the way to make me become a Muslim.
Yeah, but as we know, logic is not the I don't know, forte of this God.
Yeah. There's another one there, 262. Those who are Jews and Christians and Sabians, whoever believes in Allah and the last day and does righteous good deeds shall have their reward with their Lord.
Where's the one with the faces backwards? That is the nicest one in the Quran.
You know what?
Yeah, but this is like, there is explanation for this. This doesn't mean Jews and Christians today. When they say it talks about Jews, they mean Jews that lived, for example, at the time and after Moses, and that followed the monotheistic religion of that day, which also was from God. But today, you cannot follow that time's Judaism. You have to follow Islam if you want to go to paradise. And the same thing with Christians, like those who lived when Christian came and believed in Jesus in that time, they will go to heaven. But if you remain on today's Christianity, they will not go to heaven. And the same thing with this other sects as well.
Right. And then the points made here in the last 10 years of Muhammad's prophethood, the message changed the opposite when he got power. Along the lines of fighting the Jews and Christians is legislated because they are idolaters and disbelievers. Allah the Exalted encourages the believers to fight the polytheists, disbelieving Jews and Christians who uttered this terrible statement and utter lies against Allah, Jews, Christians, in their mouths, but they do not have proof that support their claim. Question for you guys, how serious or how authoritative do Muslims in general, and again, maybe Shias and Sunnis have different views on this, take the tafsir?
Depends on what tafsir it is. I can write a tafsir. Tafsir is just like this, for example, Tafsir ibn Kathir, that Sunni Muslims take that is one of the most trusted tafsir book, Tafsir ibn Kathir.
Okay, right. These are all Ibn Kathir here as well. So again, if you're a Sunni, then these surahs here, these tafsirs here, would be strong, or they would be well accepted amongst the Sunni community.
Then you have, I for example like very much Tafsir al-Tabari, because that is one of the earliest, because I find that interesting, because it's one of the earliest. I find it interesting from more like kind of historical, or what do we call it, Orientalist point of view.
Right. Here's some more surahs, here's some more tafsirs. Again, involving violence. Here, jihad involves killing and the shedding of blood. Allah, to disbelieve in him is worse than killing, etc. So
this is spiritual blood, I'm sure.
Yes, of course. As if there is such a thing, huh? It's just, as you read this, and again, people that don't read this, you listen to Muslim apologists and they will never talk about these verses, will they? Never talk about these verses.
And here's another mistake in the Quran.
Sorry?
We used to worship Ezra, the son of Allah. No, sorry, the Jews never had them.
Yeah, that is one. Or maybe there was some kind of obscure sect.
No, there was an obscure sect, and Ezra is a well-liked person for the Jews, but he was never the son of a god.
Yeah. But who knows? Maybe there was some obscure sect that made him into that. Who knows? But it's also kind of funny that in the Quran it says the name for the Christian in the Quran is Nasara, referring to Nazareth. And there was actually a sect, I think they were called the Nazarenes. So that's a kind of a peculiarity that is interesting for historians. Why they call it Nasara?
Maybe we should do each part of these separately. There's so many parts in here that we can do. Can they be taken as friends? And there's a whole section on this as well.
Well,
This
there's
is part of
contradictions
one.
here.
Sorry, say that again.
Abu, go.
You were saying something?
No. I always said that this is part of the fiqh and of not only fiqh, but this is important part of this whole topic of wala wal bara. One more time, can you take someone, the friend, the family, and what is allowed to do and what is not allowed to do? I mean, for example, family members, that's an issue. Say that your parents are kuffar, you still have to treat them and kind of well and obey them as long as they don't order you to do something that disobeys God.
Yeah, but you're not allowed to give the water.
But when it comes to friends, there's another thing. You shouldn't befriend with kuffar, like in general, unless they're family, because family ties is a kind of special thing, especially your mother and your father. But you shouldn't become friend with kuffar, like in general.
And if you do, then you have the contradiction, and then it goes into the tafsir, and then you need to interpret that, and then it goes to the scholars, and then the ulama has to decide whether or not this is the case or not. So at the end of the day, it's humans again deciding what you're supposed to do and what not.
I mean, that I don't have time to research that, but I remember where I can find it, like the fiqh of whether or not you can befriend a kafir that is not your close relative.
It says any friendship that is not built on the fear of Allah is only going to lead to hellfire. And that's you get different versions here. This is the whole point.
What do you mean? Do you get different versions?
You get different versions of how to treat the friendship between Christians and Muslims.
Yeah, but yes, I mean, you're always going to get this kind of weird guys that...
Yeah.
But if you follow the evidence and look what the text says, I think it's quite clear that you should not befriend. You should not spend time with a Christian and just like sit and talk unless you're making dawah on him.
There you go.
You can just pick out any one of these here as we go through here. Quran 3:28. Let not the believers take disbelievers for their friends. Whoso doth that hath no connection with Allah. Jeez, the language is.
Whoso doeth that has no connection with Allah.
Thank you. Well, you could, there's just so many things in here. Take not Jews and Christians for friends among you, who taketh them for friends is one of them. So even if we ignored all the tafsirs and we just picked up, Quranic verses here, again, this, as you scroll through, I mean, just look how many there are. I just keep scrolling here, and here are unpleasant verses. If they believe in Allah and the Prophet, they would not choose them, the disbelievers, for their friends.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would any Muslims seriously come on here and say, in fact, no, they can be friends with disbelievers?
Yes.
How would they attempt to justify that, though? In your experience, stop, so Abu, because you've presumably spoken to people who have said that.
That you can say that if you have the intention of making dawah on someone, you can like. I think I did that sometimes, like that. For example, I met a kafir and then I like treated him well and was like polite and everything, but I had the intention of kind of indirectly making dawah on him. It's not that I was a real friend, and I was not intending to spend longer periods of time with him or something like that.
Yeah, and I can second that. I've had people come to me because I've asked them. I said to them, yeah, but hang on, we're sitting having a good time, but you're not actually supposed to do that. He says, well, yeah, but hang on. I do not know that because I'm a good guy to you, that maybe one day you will revert back to Islam. And then I will get the price for that because I was a good and nice person to you here and today. So this is the way that they get around this.
Islam.
Yeah, but then that's strictly not being a friend, though, is it? So that's being acquainted.
Of course he is, because you might just become a friend when you become a Muslim tomorrow.
Yeah, but at the moment, before you become that, he's not a friend to you.
Maybe one thing we should say also, I don't know if I didn't mention that there's many hadith that talks about like how dangerous it is to not only to spend time with kuffar, but also even to spend time with Muslims that are not practicing the religion as they should, because they might have bad influence on you. I think there's even a hadith that says it's better to be alone than to be with someone that has bad, I don't remember the exact wording, but someone that can drive you into sin.
Yeah. Here's another one, family. Quran 9:23. Choose not your fathers nor your brethren for friends if they take pleasure in disbelief. Whoso of you taketh them for friends, such are wrongdoers. So there's again one, Abu. So that seems to suggest not necessarily the case. If they're disbelievers, then you shouldn't have them as friends, I guess, in that sense.
Yes. I mean, there's many, like, how do you say tafsil in English? Like, there's many...
Exegesis.
Like...
interpretations.
No, not the interpretations. There's many, like, different situations. So, for example, if you're in a peaceful situation, like you have parents that are kuffar, then in one situation you should treat them well. But say that you somehow like ends up on the battlefield and they are fighting on the side of the kuffar, and if you have to kill them, should you kill them? Then yeah, you should kill them. So it's like there's so many. It depends on the situation.
Again, there's more Quranic verses. Same thing again. You will not find any people who believe in
calling the audience family.
Sorry, say again. Sorry, I missed you.
Teach is saying that, Rob, you called the audience family. No, you did not.
What?
Yeah.
I never called the audience family. What are you talking about? Who's this person?
The way that you were reading the sentence, you said family and then made a break because there was something grayed out, and then you continued. And it sounded like you were saying family the way that Sarah and those people are doing. But you were not. It was
no, I don't speak like that. No, obviously I don't speak like that. No.
But while we're on the topic, I want everybody to give us a thumbs up. How about that? Guys? I mean, we've got 3 thumbs down. This is a bad ratio. So if we could improve the ratio, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Yes, please give us a thumbs up if you are enjoying the show. And if you're not, then share with us why not in the comments. And if you want to come on, correct us or give us a different view, then let me know. Because you need to friend me on Facebook so that I can see who you are and that you're a genuine person, so that we avoid trolls and the like.
Abu, what is the Muwatta Malik? How much of a standing does it have? Because I'm getting conflicting information where some say it's the highest commentary and some say, nah, it's just another book. What is your opinion on this?
The Muwatta Malik is a bit a book of its own, because it's a hadith collection of Imam Malik, and the standard kind of like Sunni position is that it's not as valuable as Sahih al-Bukhari or Sahih Muslim. But then you have some guys like Saracen, for example. I remember he said that Malik's Muwatta is higher than Bukhari, but he's a kind of French. I mean, I think he's some kind of Sufi. So,
so you have different sects within Islam who grant the Muwatta different standing or different level.
Yes, but the main sect, like they see Muwatta it's a very good hadith collection, but it's not that every hadith in it is sahih and not. So it's depending on what chain it has. Some hadiths are very, very sahih, as most in Sahih al-Bukhari, and some are weak.
Okay, because I could never classify it because I'm getting conflicting information there.
Yeah, and there is not like exact consensus on what hadith that are, but there is a kind of overlapping. There are some hadiths that in Muwatta that most scholars think is sahih.
Rob, just go back a bit. This is the most terrible hadith ever.
Which one?
In my eyes, just go back one page.
Mhm.
There. Do not precede the Jews and the Christian. Don't even say hi to them.
Which one are you looking at there? I'm just trying to find it.
Did you go too much up? Because I saw it just now. Go down a bit. Here we are at the bottom now. Yeah, there where you are, one down.
Oh, this one here.
Now, the interesting one is do not live among the idolaters, okay? This is something that came up on Speaker's Corner. You're not supposed to even live in the country, okay? And if you go and you integrate with the people, unless you are giving them dawah, if you live amongst them, then you are similar to them. So this is also something that a lot of people are saying, how can you live in the country when it says very clearly you're not supposed to? And the next one, I think, is the worst of them all. Don't greet Christians and the Jews.
But look, salam. Okay, there's another hadith in Tirmidhi.
Exactly, where you have to. Yeah.
No. Sabran. There's a hadith where Aisha, there was a Jew that walked by Aisha and the Prophet, and Aisha said to the Jew, "Assalamu alaikum," meaning death be upon you. So the Prophet said to her, no, don't say that. Yes, if he says salam alaikum to you, you should only say wa alaikum, and to you. But you should not say the word salam to a kafir. So you can greet them and say hello, but you can't say salam.
It's great. I tell you, it's really tough to be a Muslim, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many rules here. You don't know, the moment you open your mouth or do anything, there's most probably something that tells you what you can and can't say in so many different situations, except some of the moral situations, of course. Those are conspicuously absent. But this one here stops, this one above here that you talked about here. Whoever lives among them, assembles, integrates with them, he is similar to them. But then you're saying that they can, quote unquote, integrate, in inverted commas, if the purpose is to do dawah, to spread Islam.
Yes, but if you stay among them, I mean, that is an interesting thing, because if you're not allowed to live in the land of the kuffar, in Darul Kufar, unless you have some very special reason. So
presumably doing dawah.
There are certain things, like you can go there and make some necessary trade. You can go there and in order to make dawah, but not anyone should go and make dawah. It's only like people that have like students of Islam and ulama and so on can go and make dawah. It's just the only person. You can go and make trade, and you can be there or spend shorter periods there in special cases. But a kafir, a Muslim should move from Darul Kufr to Darul Islam. It's in the Quran, أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةٌ فَتُحَاجِرُ فِيهَا. So it wasn't the God's earth wide enough to make hijrah on it. So you have to, making hijrah from Darul Kufr to Darul Islam is actually a wajib. It's actually, you have you're committing a sin if you're not making hijrah from
Thanks, Kalam, for tidying things up here.
Kalam?
Oh, come on, family, hit that like button. Yes, please, hit the like button. All right, so let's move on and just see what else we can see here. I want to go a little bit further on. Again, every one of
Rob, I think I can disappoint you. It's not going to get better.
No, I kind of understood that. I just wanted to see if there was anything more. I think there's plenty more we can go. By the way, people, if in case you thought that this was we're anywhere near the end of this, no, there isn't. We could carry on here, and I could present you who knows how many. I could literally zip down here. We're on page 22 here only, and I could zip down here. There's tons and tons more of this. We haven't even got to some of the other headings here, but I think it's fairly clear just from the small selection that we've given you here that there is overwhelming numbers of hadiths, tafsirs, Quranic verses that suggest you cannot be friends, and that the status of a non-believer is, if I was extremely charitable, not equal to a believer. And that's, being massively charitable. So
I mean, maybe one day we should make a show about wala wal bara, and I go through it and like the fiqh of
when
it.
are you available to do it? Let's book it in now. When are you available?
I don't dare to make any. I mean, I'm not sure I can do it.
Non-committal. Come on.
No. But look, right now I definitely don't have this month. There's many things I would do. I would like to do this Patricia Kroner book also, but that is one show.
So you're kind of making a promise here. You're making a statement, so you've got to at some point get to it before we forget about it. So,
remind me sometime to make.
I'll remind you.
Well, what happened to Raven and his end times?
No idea. So hopefully that's been of value, guys. I've got a lot more information. I mean, we could go on for hours here, but I think you get the point. And if anybody wants any more information, you've seen a small selection of the repository that's available with these verses. So, and there's so many more there. We could go on for an hour. I mean, if I took these down to Speaker's Corner, no Muslim would ever get to say a word for 2 hours, and I could just rattle all of these off to show, the view that Islam has on believers in various situations. So is there anything more we want to add with regards to that? Is anything that obviously we could go on and on, but stop. So Abu, is there anything else that you wanted to add, or is there anything you want to put there that we can underline this to suggest that I think it's clear from my point of view anyway that disbelievers are not seen favorably, to put it mildly.
Thank God I'm an atheist.
Yeah. And as we'll see if we get onto a couple of other things here as well, the mental gymnastics that has to happen as well in order to prop up your worldview as a Muslim is
Getting love from Allah is like getting love from Belly Button Fuzz.
Nice. Yes.
We do reviews of videos. Come on, we do it every third or fourth show. If you want if you have an idea, if you want a review of a particular video, please don't be shy. Hit it and we'll do it.
Speaking of which, I'm going to give you a short part here. Since people were asking, I want to do a very short little bit here on this particular video. And the reason I bring this up, so I'll preface it. So the gentleman over here, I don't know if you can see my arrow.
Was that one of these stalls?
Whoa. This gentleman on the left here, my cursor is not appearing, but the fellow on the left here is Abbas. He's a regular visitor to Speaker's Corner as part of I think he's part of the I-Era team or Dawah, Mission Dawah, whatever it is, one of these sort of groups. And his whole view is that Islam is just the most peaceful, wonderful religion, and Muhammad was the perfect example to follow. And wherever there's problematic verses, as we've shown here, he would try and find some response to interpret that, ignore it, sidestep it, whatever the case is. And in this discussion, he's talking about how wonderful the Qur'an is. He talked earlier about, and maybe that's something to look into. He's got this particular guy. I forget the name now, but welcome to watch the video. I will actually share the video here in the main chat, so you can go and watch the whole lot of it and pop it in there. Don't say EF Dawah, we don't do things for you. But in this particular thing, I want you just to listen to this. Abu, you haven't heard this. I think Stops has, but I'm just going to play this now, and I want you to listen. So here he's telling the story of somebody that wanted to join Islam. So let's just, hopefully you can hear this and just listen into this.
He was on one of these stalls. He turned the Qur'an and he read some verses of Surah Ar-Rahman, the chapter Ar-Rahman. And in that chapter, Allah says over and over again, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. How many of the favors of your Lord will you deny? How many of the favors of your Lord will you deny? In that chapter, it's mentioned over and over again. He closed it. He said, how do I become a Muslim? He accepted Islam. My point to you is that it's not one thing that will convince one person.
To ever convince me.
I wanted to share that because my claim has been, and I reiterated here, that everyone that accepts it consciously is doing so without engaging their critical thinking faculties at a high level. And I just heard this, and I was like, you watch a lot of these videos, and like Stops and I, and watch so many of these. To some degree, you switch off. But then somebody says something like this, and it's like a shot out of the bolt out of the blue almost. That he would mention some guy that read a verse that said a sentence over and over, and this presumably appealed to this fellow that was reading it, non-Muslim, and he then wanted to join Islam. And I keep saying, people are not critical. They don't look into this as a whole world ideology, worldview. And when they accepted any of these converts, reverts, or anything like this, they just haven't engaged their critical thinking faculties. And they haven't looked into it deeply. And here for me was the textbook example of something like that. Somebody reads something they like that speaks to them in some way, and they then want to accept Islam.
I'm a bit skeptical about these stories that they know nothing about Islam, and then they have this one interaction and they immediately switch. I'm a bit skeptical that is how, because I can understand that Muslims believe that, but from what we know about human psychology and so on, is this really what happens? I think most of the times it's more like they have some period of interaction, and then slowly they become
Well, I'm happy to take it on. I'm happy to. I mean, I've heard of people that, either again, you're taking it as secondhand information, but I've heard of people make changes in their life on other ideologies, worldviews, decisions, whatever, on the scantest of reasons as well, like this. For it,
because do they really do that? I mean, for example, say that Dave Rubin, for example, he was a progressive, wasn't he? And now he's more kind of a classical liberal, for example. And maybe he will say some story about, well, I interacted with this Jang Jugar, or this guy TYT, and he was an asshole, and so on. But I don't think that there was one moment that changed him. Maybe that was an important moment, but I think it's probably a kind of transition period where you start to doubt, and then after a while you realize that this is not a good.
You're definitely being the ultimate skeptic. So you are at least doing the textbook thing for those who are watching, of being, almost the ultimate skeptic. I'm prepared to accept that some people will literally make that decision for those reasons. The point that
the reason why I am skeptic is because
why
I have read a bit. I mean, I'm very interested in psychology and neuroscience, so I've studied this a lot, and I'm a bit skeptical. Is that really how it happens? I mean,
well, if you've studied that stuff, surely you would have come across cases like that.
Yeah, but as I said, I can't.
Not the norm, possibly, but I'm quite happy to accept that there's people that do that. It's literally like the critical thinking faculties is completely has vanished.
Yes, that can happen.
Well, that's what I'm
Yeah, yes, there are people who like, yes, there are people who, but I mean, if you take like normal cases, like not people are kind of suffering from some parts of the brain not functioning. I mean, like a normal case. Yeah, okay, maybe that happens.
I think it's late on your side.
Okay.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying nobody's claiming that it's the norm that people are doing this. I do claim it's the norm that people are not using their critical thinking faculties well enough, but to a low degree, like is shown in this video here. I'm not necessarily claiming that's
Okay, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but I doubt that.
the main point of this video, and the main reason to show this, is that he uses this as an example to convince or to explain to other people. For me, I would never ever, if somebody said, "Hey Rob, I read Richard Dawkins, and there was this verse, there was a little paragraph in there that talked about, a meme, and how, a wonderful story about how we came from a common ancestor to a human. And on that basis alone, I became an atheist." I'd be going, holy crap, I would never explain that to somebody else as in, hey, here's an example of a model person who's critical thinking, who left Islam or Christianity or whatever and became an atheist. I'd be going, holy crap.
Okay, look, I actually have to, I think I thought about this. I think I have to take back my extreme skepticism there. Maybe it is possible.
Well, I think it's clear. But I think the reason he brought this up is just so bewildering to me, that you would bring this up to explain this to a non-believer, to a skeptical non-believer, the guy with the glasses on the right-hand side next to the guy with the cap, who's sort of, been talking about how he's skeptical of it. And so you bring up this as in any way to add weight or to be convincing or anything like that. He said it himself that, there's many different reasons. I mean, that would be a terrible reason. And so why would you bring up ostensibly a terrible reason for converting to Islam?
But look, people don't make decisions like not even like we don't make decisions based on like rational thinking. We might tell ourselves stories that we like do this for this and this reason, but most of the times that just like what do you call it in English? Afterwards constructions. It's like in fact, many of the times it's like signals from the limbic systems like taking over your brain, and then like you have an urge to do it, and then afterwards you rationalize it. So what people say may not be the real reason, and that part of what, because of that, they may not be aware of the whole reason, and then they may remember things incorrectly and things like that. We are extremely good at fooling ourselves.
Yes, there may well be other reasons that people forget to say or are not aware of. So when this guy, read this verse that seemed to speak to him and that sort of changed his mind, there may have been other things that have happened in his life that he wasn't consciously aware of, and that verse had special significance. But regardless of that, the fact that the man wanted to convert to Islam based on reading a single verse or a paragraph in a book without any further investigation, according to Abbas, is probably one of the worst reasons that somebody can convert. And that's why I often say, Muslims shouldn't confuse quantity with quality, because that's what they do. Hey, look at all these people becoming converts who are choosing Islam. Well, yes, there may well be a number of them, but the quality is extremely low, if not non-existent from my point of view. So the fact that there's lots of them doesn't say anything other than there's a lot of people who are not using their critical thinking faculties. That's the point that I would make.
I have to make a short pause. I'll come back soon. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sure. Okay, no, that's exactly the point. Saracen wanted to know what the source is of the text. That's all.
Which text? Sorry. Oh, you were talking to me.
On the screen.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I just thought that was every so
you have the source. What was it? Is it by somebody? Is it a book? Is it a compilation? Or Who is it by?
Oh, you mean the source that I had on the screen? Yes. So
Yes.
that was that is, I'll tell you now. That's a database, a compilation by, and I wish I could give, because I don't see who it's by here. Somebody did tell me. I don't know if it's TS Dave or somebody. I'm not entirely sure. I wish I could. I'd be happy to give them credit for that. And I'm just looking here quickly to see if I can see. It does not say who put it together. I wish I could, because I'd be quite happy to do that. So it's a fairly extensive database of 370 pages that I can see here of information that brings up, that is critical of Islam and brings up various information, data, etc., to show this, peaceful verses, non-Muslim.
TDS Dave says, no, wasn't me.
Not you. Okay. You're obviously often a source of great information, Dave. So I thought possibly it was you. I can't remember.
That was so good.
Hatred here. Can you leave Islam? Women, slavery, and racism. So there's a significant.
Are you going to put the link in the description?
If I can find it.
No, not now in the chat. Later on into the description.
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, sure, I can do that. So.
Because come on, this is a brilliant repository.
Yes, it is. It's excellent for anybody who wants to go and use it and copy and paste bits and find information.
Print it out and take it to Speaker's Corner.
Oh, yeah. You have a volume that's home that far surpasses the Quran in size.
Over the wheelbarrow.
Yeah, exactly. So good. I just wanted to share that part of that video. Again, I've put it into the chat, so you're welcome to go and watch it yourself. There's a part 1 as well with Hamza doing his thing.
Yeah, but I think it's really primitive. I have not watched that. I do not watch what EF Dawah does, because for me it's simply too childish. So I have not even looked at this. So yeah.
But there is something else I want to share here, and this is from a fellow colleague who has put this together, and I will definitely put this in the chat. So this is
Jesus, he's so good.
Yeah, this is a separate thing. Please go, and if you are interested, please go and look at this link. Somebody in the group that myself and Stops are part of has gone and done some research on this. And this might sound a bit of a off-field topic, but actually the blog is called Dawah Hindian Delusions. In other words, people doing Dawah and the delusions of Dawah, people doing Dawah. And this particular blog post is one of many, he assures me, that is taking aim at Sabur Ahmed, and in particular around evolution. And I'll just briefly go through it, because there's a lot of wonderful information that he goes through. I'll just scroll a little bit through this here so you can kind of see it. He's done a lot of information. Believe me, this gentleman has done his homework on Sabur and our era, like Stops, and maybe even to a deeper level in certain things, because he's read a number of the books and so on. So this is really good stuff. And the main point of this, certainly the point that I got, and there's a lot more to it, is the continual claim of Sabur, at least, and possibly other people, that there's a lot of controversy around natural selection as one of the mechanisms for evolution. And there's a lot made by Sabur about this, and this gentleman goes into it. However, the main overarching, would I use the word mechanism, process of evolution is common descent, over time. And nobody, even the people that Sabur claims or uses, deny common descent. And so if common descent is true, then the Quran is either false, or you need to do all kinds of tap dances to accept the two of them, because Stops and I were talking about it before. And so challenging natural selection does not challenge common descent. And this is, but please go and read it for yourself if you're interested in this, because this gentleman, as I say, goes into a lot of detail. There's lots of links in here. I really wanted to share this. I didn't tell him I was going to do it, but I think anybody who's interested in the topic and so forth would be interested in this. And he goes through this, as I say, and this he was suggesting is just a single point, for want of a better word, that he was addressing. And so and in particular, because Sabur mentions and quote mines and name drops a lot of different people, and just for interest here, one of them one of these places is something called the third way. And if you've watched any of his videos, you will hear he mentioned this guy, James Shapiro, who talks about natural genetic engineering as a alternative to natural selection, which is just one of the processes involved in evolution. And again, remember, we have an overarching process, if you want to call it that, of common descent. So this is just a single part in there, but this is often quoted as a alternative. And so there's all this controversy that's going on in evolution, which isn't true. There's discussion on certain parts of the mechanisms, but I want to go back here. So this site called The Third Way has got all these people that you'll hear: Dennis Noble, James Shapiro. I haven't heard him mention this fellow. He has mentioned Eva Jablonka, etc. And so this site is all about saying, hey, where is it? I'll tell you exactly what they say here. The third way is essentially, let me just go back here.
But this is totally valid. There's nothing wrong with this.
Well, they're exploring a third option because according to them, yeah. So they're exploring a third option, which is the vast majority of people believe there's only two alternative ways to explain the origins of biological diversity. One way is creationism that depends on intervention of a divine creator. That is clearly unscientific because it brings in arbitrary supernatural force. The commonly accepted alternative is neo-Darwinism. And again, this term, most people don't use this term, so I don't know why they keep using neo-Darwinism. Presumably because it's and again, if you go look at the blog post, if I remember correctly, and I stand to be corrected when I read it, Darwin didn't. Natural selection was a part of something that he touched on, but it wasn't the main driving force anyway for Darwinism. So they seem to like this word. This is almost like, to me, this is like the word Nazi in a sense. It's something that that is derogatory, that seemingly, and they seem to like to use this word as well. So they are looking at a different option. But if we go back here a moment, they say these are the people on the third way. Listen to this. It has come to our attention that third way website is wrongly being referenced by proponents of intelligent design and creationist ideas as support for their arguments. We intend
they would, of course.
The website and scientists listed on this website do not support or subscribe to any proposals that resort to inscrutable divine forces or supernatural intervention, whether they are called creationism, intelligent design, or anything else.
Exactly. But they don't. This is what I showed in the two videos that I've made about this guy's support. He does not understand what he is saying, and nor do a lot of the other people. They are looking at this and they're saying, well, if somebody is proposing something different, they must be critical. No, it's not. All what what we're saying is a car is a car, but we're looking at alternatives. And if you put an electric motor into a car, it still is a car. It is still with the purpose of transporting people. So evolution as such has not changed. It's just that some mechanisms which we don't fully understand can be updated. And I think it should be done that we go and we investigate and we find if there are things which might be a better explanation for the phenomenon that we see today. Absolutely. None of this is chiseled in stone. And this is what we need to understand. Science does not change. But the things, the consequences, the conclusions that we derive from the data, that can very well change. And this is it.
Yeah. And if you wanted to undermine evolution rather than neo-Darwinism and these other sort of terms, if you wanted to undermine evolution, then you would need to demonstrate that common ancestry is problematic.
Or doesn't work or something. Exactly.
Correct. Yeah. And so, and here's the key point. Common ancestry does not assume natural selection. So we can actually put that aside. That's one, as we say, one small mechanism or one of a number of mechanisms in there. But as we'll see later on, there is some discussion around that. But the overwhelming majority of experts in the different fields still favor natural selection as one of the driving forces that underpin natural selection, but it doesn't have to be, as is quite commonly as is clearly shown here.
I love the creativity we have in the chat. Kane says, Subur is about as trustworthy. Sorry, let me try again. Subur is about as trustworthy as a glory hole in a butcher's shop when it comes to explaining Darwinian evolution.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it appeals to my sixth sense of humor. Because I have such a vivid imagination. I'm just looking at a butcher's shop.
And just
I'm sorry. It's silly, but it's so nice.
here are some of the, because again, these are people that are being quoted. So here are some of their responses. James Shapiro, one of the persons that is oft quoted.
Yes, and I've looked at this, and I've demonstrated he doesn't understand what James Shapiro is actually saying.
Yes, and here is what this gentleman in his blog post is quoting. Every new technology that is developed simply reinforces this idea that all living organisms are related to one another.
That's it, yeah.
Eva Blanca, no one is contesting the fact that evolution through descent with modifications. Lynn Margulis, this is another one. All scientists agree that evolution has occurred, that all life comes from common ancestry. So all of these people that are being quoted accept common ancestry. And that's the thing that would need to be undermined in order for you to say that there is real problems with or real challenges in the evolution, the evolution overriding principle.
Yeah, but Subur doesn't understand that he does not understand. This is the problem. He is really convinced that he understands us the same way as sources thought that he understands embryology, which he doesn't. But it's crazy. Dunning-Kruger all over, yeah.
Again, Jerry Fodor is oft quoted as well, and here it is. Even Jerry Fodor, whilst having philosophical objections to the explanatory role that is possible for natural selection to play, detailed in his book, What Darwin Got Wrong, again, that book is quoted, apparently, still insists that, quote, the Darwinian account of our species' history is common ground for all civilized discussions, so it should be. The evidence is really overwhelming. So the alleged consensus among evolutionary biologists that common ancestry assumes natural selection simply does not exist. Perhaps the idea may, and so he goes on there. And then he sort of pokes fun at a few of these other people that don't know what they're talking about either. This gentleman is, again, oft quoted here. I think he's a philosopher in evolutionary biology. It's important to keep in mind these two elements in Darwin's theory are separate, i.e., natural selection and common ancestry. The idea that all present living things are related isn't at all controversial. The idea that natural selection is the principal cause of evolutionary change is, quote, somewhat controversial, although it is still by far the majority view among biologists. This is the person that is actually being quoted, and here he is saying, majority view. Part of the reason it's important to keep these ideas separate is that some creationists have tried to score points by confusing them. Well, what do we know? Isn't that hit the nail on the head? Arguments from common ancestry do not require the assumption that natural selection has been at work. So again, if we ever hear somebody challenging a natural selection, we can quote one of their favorite people, somewhat controversial, but is still by far the majority view. But if we were incredibly charitable and we said there was massive, challenges to natural selection, that would in no way undermine common ancestry.
Yeah, but hang on, you need to understand this is talking about principle, okay? So you always need to look at what is somewhat contrary. It's the principal cause of evolutionary change. And that is what is somewhat controversial. It's not the concept, it's not the mechanism, none of that is controversial at all. So they don't understand when scientists, because they are very specific, say something, they need to understand why they are specific and what is behind what they are saying. And people like Subur don't do that. They see the words and they recognize the words, and then they say, well, there you go. You see, they're critical. And they're not.
Do you know what? I'm undecided on that. Maybe you're 100% true. It could actually be that they do recognize that this is, but they still cherry pick it, which would be even worse. If they didn't understand it, that would be just ignorance in and of itself. But if in fact they do know this, and they've just ignored these bits, etc., and cherry-picked versions, which is what I think potentially could be the case. I'm not suggesting it is, but it could well be the case, given that's been the tactics that's been used in other spheres where we've caught them out. That could well be the case, which makes it much worse. So they do know this is the case, and they are intentionally being dishonest here, hoping that they will fool either myself, because I'm not an expert, or more likely all the Muslim viewers and followers that would never look into this, and just because they sound intelligent, these people will follow them. And of course, I think that's 100 times worse. So, and again, all the people here talking about it. So there's tons of, there's Charlie Dizzle, Charlie himself. There's tons of information. So I encourage you to go and read this. As I say, I've put it into the quote there, put it into the chat. So well worth a look, because it just encapsulates and I think exposes this claim about natural selection being undermined. If natural selection tomorrow was completely undermined, that would not undermine evolution and certainly common ancestry. So I just thought I would.
Exactly. This is what TTSA is saying. The nicest moment for me was when I found that what he was doing, he was quoting the Discovery Institute straight off their pages. This is where he gets it from. But then, Rob, you're just bitter because he owned you.
Yes, of course. That's right. Yeah. I don't care what's true. I'm just trying to get somebody back, because it was a big mistake, by the way, to do that, because now obviously I've focused some attention in that direction. He was just another loudmouth down there at Speaker's Corner, and I didn't really pay him any attention. But after our encounter, that sort of galvanized my view. And
now I remember the thing a bird whispered in my ear that there's going to be the day for freedom or something like that.
In 2 days.
Yes. Before we forget, thank you, Abu.
Freedom March.
So May the 6th, this coming Sunday, there will be a free speech rally and demonstration for those who are interested in London. Sadly, I can't. I have a family thing that I cannot change. I've tried all kinds of different things, because I would have got down there and live streamed it for you guys for the entire time. So I'm somewhat disappointed, to say the least. But it's happening. So firstly, there's a couple of different things. The main demonstration / discussions and speeches will be done in Whitehall. For those who don't know, who don't live in the UK, Whitehall is essentially like, outside the White House, if you're in the US. So Whitehall is Downing Street, other words, the residence of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and they will be doing it very close to that location. There's a big screen, apparently. It's going to be huge, a PA system and all this sort of stuff. That'll be 3 p.m. on Sunday the 6th, and there'll be all kinds of people coming down. There'll obviously be Tommy Robinson. There'll be a number of other conservative speakers, even a couple of liberal-ish speakers like Saga Navakard and others. So they're consider themselves more sort of left-wing, but that terminology has been blurred these days. So there's different people. The main topic is, and they disagree with each other on certain things, but the reason they're all coming together is for free speech. However, there will also be a couple of groups. I think it's the Football Lads Alliance and somebody else are going to be meeting at 1:30 at Speaker's Corner, and they will then be walking along a certain route. You just have to follow them if you were there, and they'll be going down to Whitehall from Speaker's Corner, which should take 45 minutes to an hour. So they should arrive around 2:30-ish. Apparently, there will also be some Antifa. Somebody pointed me towards a Facebook post where some Antifa members are doing MMA boxing down in Brighton, which is on the coast. About 100 miles. No, it's not 100 miles, but less. I don't know. But call it 100 miles from London on the Saturday. And then part of the post literally says on their Facebook post, why not make it a double whammy, quote unquote, and stay on for the Tommy Robinson thing? In other words, they're doing this thing on Saturday, these Antifa guys that are doing some kind of MMA fighting or demonstrations or whatever, and then stay on the next day for Sunday, go up to London and quote unquote challenge these guys. And so obviously these guys can't have a rational discussion, so it's more likely, to try and, intimidate or push buttons or whatever the case is, or potentially to provoke some violence.
I think it's going to be boring.
Yeah, I think the
Going to
numbers
be
will be.
standing there. There will be some speeches that everybody's going to. I don't think this is a big thing. Well, I hope it's not going to be, but this is
Well,
what
they're
I
going to
anticipate.
be live streaming it. So Tommy Robinson's crew are going to be live streaming it directly as well. So for those who are interested, they will start it
Yeah,
probably
I hope
then.
they
or
learned
earlier.
from last time what a disaster, because they failed completely.
Yes. So hopefully they, it's a shame I'm not there because I can deal with those technicalities quite well.
Yeah, but Kalam, I'm sure, is going to be there.
Yes, well,
Content over everything, definitely, because now there's a lot of people who are available that are taking to recording things like that, which I think is brilliant, because the more the better.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing I thought about, if in fact there's any live streams that go off in Speaker's Corner, here's the interesting thing that just sort of occurred to me. Anybody who's in Speaker's Corner at 3 p.m. is obviously somebody who does not support free speech and yet will be taking advantage of it, ironically, by being in Speaker's Corner. Because if you supported free speech, you would be in Whitehall at 3 p.m. And so hopefully those people that do support free speech will take the time to go down to Whitehall, whether they agree with every single speaker or not, because the overarching idea is, hey, there's freedom of speech. And that's obviously part of it, is being able to disagree with certain speakers, which we have seen in the last few years has become problematic for people on the far left, at least, and certainly some Muslims to some degree. When somebody gets a little bit like a Tan or a Sarah or whoever, gets a bit more blunt about it, then they don't like that. So you can criticize, but only to a certain level that they will allow, which of course is clearly not free
I think
speech.
I saw Steve and Tan in the promo video.
Yes, and Raj.
Yes.
Raj was there as well.
Yeah, a lot of people were there.
3 of the people that we know, at least, and then some other sort of people that if you have a look on YouTube, you'll recognize them. You've got the gay the gay Catholic Christian, Milo Yiannopoulos, a walking contradiction in terms. Spot on.
But he was not blonde this time.
Catholic Christian.
Say again.
Gay Jewish Catholic Christian.
He's Jewish.
Assent,
Yes.
He's married actually to a black gentleman.
Yeah. A gay Jewish.
He's being accused of being a racist and a Nazi. So these.
He's a gay Jewish Catholic Christian married to a black man, homosexual, that simultaneously is a Nazi.
And a racist, yeah.
And a racist.
That's crazy. It is crazy. This is how ridiculous it is getting, really. It's stupid. Okay, anything else? Anything important?
Content over everything. I'm trying to be in 2 places at the same time. Content, make sure you get down to Whitehall.
Why 2 places?
I guess I don't know. Maybe he wants to be in Speaker's Corner as well. The only people who can be in Speaker's
Corner is going to be dead.
Well, hopefully it'll be dead. It will be fantastic if the only people in Speaker's Corner are some Muslims. Obviously, there'll be other people there.
Mental masturbation at its best.
But yeah, so thanks for reminding us. So yeah, again, hopefully Content will bring us some great content, as he always does. Dude, you need to learn how to live stream. You and I need to chat. I can explain it to you. Obviously, if I was down more often, I could do it. And a small setup, I can live stream for 4 hours. I just need to get down to do it. Good.
Okay.
Anything else? It sounds like Stops wants to go.
I want to go to the toilet, and I'm not going to take a break now and come back after 2 seconds, am I?
Well, you could. You can take a quick break. So if you want to mute yourself and go and relieve yourself.
You don't want to listen in?
Sorry.
No, I don't think we know what it sounds like. There we go. He's off. He's gone to do that. So anything else from the chat? If you are listening, I'm sorry. I did ask Saracen if he wanted to join, and then I didn't follow up with that, so I'm not sure what he said. Oh, I think he said he was out or whatever the case is. Jinn&Tonic, have you seen the convo with Saborn about veganism, the follow-up? You mean Shabir? Yes, I have. In fact, you might have joined late, Paichi. I actually went through and read some crazy comments on that because I actually commented on that video. So there was I think he's a Canadian or certainly originally North American fellow by the name of Ken who had a conversation with Shabir. And I actually read out a crazy comment there. where I noted that Ken had put forward good arguments and Shabir had not, and Shabir or one of his underlings responded to me in a typical fashion of not having a paragraph there, but actually not saying anything of consequence. So yes, I have watched them, and I think the guy Ken obviously made some good points, and I think Shabir just doesn't. I'm not saying that there isn't an argument against veganism. What I am saying, though, Shabir has not presented any argument against it. He just used the buzzword yardstick. We've got to have a yardstick, and of course Ken was clear on what his yardstick was, and that was like just not accepted, and the buzzword yardstick kept being repeated as if somehow that had some value. So
Link Rob, TJ says.
Sorry, what's that? We're pretty much at the end now, TJ, so I'm not sure that you come on a bit late.
TJ, go and get can't you create a Skype account so we can contact you easily?
Well, I think we're pretty much at the end of the show now. So
Yeah. But to the future, I urge TJ to create a Skype account so it becomes easy.
If he hasn't got a Skype account, that would be helpful if he wants to add a Skype account.
And I'm looking for alternatives because Skype is going on my tits.
Well, I think if you he has Facebook Messengered me here as well, but it's just a bit late now. I mean, that was 3 minutes ago. TJ, I would in future. It's just I think we're pretty much at the end now, unless Abu suddenly gets more Energizer Bunny and carries on even more. He's been very vocal tonight, so maybe we need to catch him when he's tired, because he seems to be far more active when he's tired than when not. So, but I think we're pretty much at the end now. So. Guys, that's been
a hadith from the day that is kind of related, but I'm such a bad reader. Maybe we should stop spamming read instead.
Oh my God, it's another one like.
We'll make it bigger so we can see, and I'll there we go. I'll present it to everybody. There you go. Just make it bigger so Stops can see it, or I can read it. Stops is probably better. Go for it. Just make it a bit bigger there, Abu.
Wait.
That's a fairly long one as well, isn't it?
Yes, but it's related because you showed an article that was from Dabiq, which is
the Dajjal and the descent of Isa bin Maryam. Okay, descent. This is the end times.
Can you see it now?
Abu Hurairah reported us messages saying the last hour. What? Stop figuring around.
Do you see it now? Is it good?
Yeah. Last hour wouldn't come until the Romans would land at Al-Amak in Dabiq. An army consisting of the best soldiers of the people of the earth at the time will come from Medina to counteract them. When they will arrange themselves in ranks, the Romans would say, "Do not stand between us and those Muslims who took prisoners from amongst us. Let us fight with them." And the Muslims would say, "Nay, by Allah, we would never get aside from you and from our brethren that you may fight them." What? What am I reading? They will then fight, and a third party of the army would run away, whom Allah will never forgive. Now, come on. This does not make any sense. A third part, which would be constituted of excellent martyrs in Allah's eye, would be killed, and the third, who would never be put to trial, would win, and they would be conquerors of Constantinople. And as they would be busy in distributing the spoils of war amongst themselves after hanging their swords by the olive trees, the Satan would cry, "The Dajjal has taken our place among your family." They would then come out, but it would be of no avail, and they would come back to Syria. He would come out while they would be still preparing themselves for battle, drawing up the ranks. Now, certainly the time of prayer shall come, and then Jesus, son of Mary, would descend and would lead them. When the enemy of Allah would see him, it would disappear, just as the salt dissolves itself in water. And if Jesus were not to confront them at all, even then it would dissolve completely. But Allah would kill them by his hand, and he would show them their blood on his lords. The Lord, now, come on, I don't know what is going on here. Allah would kill them by his hand. So Allah has a hand, and he goes around and kills the people individually, and he would show them their blood. So he first kills somebody and then shows them their blood on his lance, the lance of. So Allah borrows the lance of Jesus, goes around, kills people, and then shows them their blood. Now, come on, who comes up with it?
The funny thing is, like you were reading this from Dabiq, wasn't it? This is ISIS has,
Yes.
because this the Romans would land
Amak and Dabiq.
A'maq or Dabiq. So they have like two propaganda like channels, Al-A'maq that mainly makes videos, I think, and then this Dabiq, which is like a paper magazine or PDF magazine or whatever.
But come on, does this make any sense in Arabic? Because in English it makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more. if
Okay,
you-
let's do this next time, not today, because this is totally.
Okay, I just thought it was kind of fun.
It was fun. Yeah. Especially God going, Jesus, can I borrow your sword? Okay, have a go. Boom, boom, boom. Here, look at your blood, you fool.
Yeah, somebody in the
Okay.
chat is saying there would be fun if you guys did more shows in different formats with actual Muslims defending their faith.
We'll
This
try.
one scares them away, I guess. Yeah,
Yeah.
we often
Nice.
invite them. I've invited, some of the so-called big players. They are very resistant, skeptical, or unwilling to come online. They all want to be down in Speaker's Corner because clearly to them that's the place where you can attempt to dominate, use tactics, whatever. Here you can look things up, and in fact there's far smarter people online who can challenge them that don't come down to Speaker's Corner, obviously. And of course that seems to be a little bit scary, maybe, who knows. But again, if your faith was that strong, you would want to challenge anyone and everyone.
16,125. 16,125. Listen, 16,125.
I don't have that up at the moment. No doubt you.
I have to convert to Islam because I heard you repeat that so many times, and now I'm convinced Islam is correct.
Yeah, you see, I said it 5 times. Now you know. I will make more videos as videos come along that I critique or analyze. I don't know. It's always the same. This is the problem. I'm getting bored now because it's either Abbas or Hamza or this hijab guy and they always say the same things. There's nothing new. There's nothing interesting. There's nothing challenging. There's nothing, that you need to get your teeth into because this.
Or maybe it's a case stops of selecting some comments or some thoughts or whatever the case is in the video, which is obviously what you do, that either you haven't covered before, or you haven't covered recently. Because I think what people find valuable is, your assessment of the certain things that they might not have seen either displayed or talked about in exactly that way, or for some period of time. So you might have done it, 3 years ago, whatever the case is, but that's a long time in this because a lot of new people are coming in.
That's also true.
It's worth repeating, and especially if the claims are coming up, like you said, embryology and some of these others are resurfacing after, you and others felt like this was completely dealt with some years ago. I think maybe some Muslims' memories are short, and so they just think, well, we'll try and resurrect this now. If nobody's going to challenge us, then it may sound as if, we've made a point here.
Yeah, okay. If you have a specific issue that you want covered, then let me know. Because at the moment, I don't see anything because I've just done embryology. There's no point now of starting to do the oceans or mountains or things like that. So as they come up, I do them. But if you have come across one, let me know.
Yeah, and especially if you've seen any videos where people are saying something either in Speaker's Corner or elsewhere, you can either pass them on to myself and I'll pass it to Stops, or straight to Stops if you've got his details. I mean, I've been using, although again, admittedly, I haven't unfortunately come across enough Muslims, but Stops is, brilliant explanation of the inheritance error in the Quran. To me, this is just a knockdown error. There's no translation here. The mathematics just doesn't work out. And the only response that they can possibly give, which is, of course, what they've done, is to change it. In other words, reduce it, to humans correcting the Quran. And, that's detrimental, deadly, to be honest. But somehow they're able to ignore this. And I challenged a Muslim recently, and he said, yes, he's going to go look into it. So every time I will come across him, I will ask him, have you gone to look into those verses? And just remind me, Stops, on that point quickly. From what I can remember, the 1/8 is not in verse 4:11, isn't it? So you've got to read all 3 verses. Is that correct?
No, just 2, 11 and 12.
Just 11 and 12. Okay.
Look, this is just I mean, you can come. No, okay. There's different examples. I created the 3 daughters, the parents, and the wife.
Yeah.
And that's 11 and 12. But then you have the sister, which is in 12 and 7 and 176.
Yeah. So again, I encourage you to go and have a look at Qur'an Claims, isn't it? I think that's the channel that you have that on. Qur'an Claims, Koran space claims, and that'll bring you to Stops's channel where he examines some of the Quranic claims. Strangely enough, exposes the nonsense that's in there. So, because you often will hear this if you've ever had any interactions with a Muslim. Oh, if you can find me just one error in the Quran. Boom, yes. Well, as it happens, may I just quote this and this verse to you? And so there
No, hang on. You first need to do the following. Always first ask, what if I do? What is your action going to be? What is the consequence of this?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. I actually did do that, but I didn't say it now. Yes, you're absolutely right. That's the question that I have been asking. What if I did present you an error? What would that mean to you? Would your faith be challenged in any way? Is your claim, the other question I sometimes ask is your claim that the Quran has 0 errors in it in any way? And if one were to be presented to you, what would that mean to you? So yes, thank you for reminding me. Because otherwise, if you haven't got the, if somebody, I don't know how many Muslims would say this, maybe one of you guys knows, Abu or Stops, if in fact any Muslims do not make the claim that the Quran is inerrant, in other words, has no
you must. No, that's not all.
Oh, that's not optional. So there's no sect or view in Islam where they can sidestep that.
No.
Okay. So that being the case, then it's still worth asking the question, though, because obviously immediately what that, again, from a psychological point of view, means somebody starts to think, ooh, is there something that they're going to present to me now? Because why would you ask that question otherwise? So it immediately will have the brain, something will be happening in the brain. They won't just be sitting there, completely quietly. The brain will start to operate whether they want it to or not, because that question, has something behind it. There's a force behind it that you're not saying straight away. So, yeah. Good. On that note, anything else, guys?
My brain has stopped functioning or operating. So.
Are you in hibernation?
Finally, it's worn out, huh? It's worn out. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you to you as the viewers. We will be back again next Friday with a topic that will come up over the week. Again, if you have a topic you'd like us to cover that we haven't covered in the last 6 months, then send us some information or drop us a line somehow, and we'll have a look into that. Until then, we will see you guys next Friday. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Good night.
Good night. Give us a thumbs up before you go.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.